Somewhere in a quiet corner of the infinite cosmos, a story waits just for you. We truly love and care for you. And in this gentle space, nothing else matters but your breath, your thoughts, and this moment. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee or your blanket, or whatever makes you feel at home, and let's drift into a tale whispered between stars. Imagine Rick, older than the universe seems to allow, and Unity, scattered across countless worlds yet somehow whole. Their journey tonight is not one of chaos, but of quiet revelations, of soft echoes that linger in the heart. Somewhere between planets, dreams, and starlight, a truth waits to fold into you like the warmest lullaby. Somewhere in a quiet corner of the infinite cosmos, a story waited. Not one of chaos or interdimensional adventure, not one of lasers or explosions, but a story that moved like a soft exhale, carrying the weight of gentle truths and long-forgotten moments. Rick awoke in that corner, not with a start, nor with the mechanical hum of a portal, but with the quiet stirring of a mind brushed by a half-remembered dream. Around him, fragments of reality hung like shards of a broken mirror, reflecting glimmers of stars, soft swirls of light, and shadows that seemed to breathe. The universe itself had slowed, folding in on itself with patience, as if it were holding its breath to watch him awaken. We truly love and care for you, he thought, not in words but as a warm pulse against the chest, a gentle insistence that it was safe to simply exist here. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Now gather your coffee or your blanket, or simply the quiet of your mind, and let us drift together into this story. The fragments of the multiverse shimmered around Rick, each piece a different possibility, a different memory, a different whisper of what might have been. A ribbon of light stretched across one fragment, bending softly like a river caught in slow motion. Dust-like particles floated gently in the air, catching light from nowhere and everywhere, carrying the faint scent of rain on a forgotten planet. And through it all a voice hummed. It was not his, yet it was his, a vibration of existence that reminded him of unity. Unity, that diffuse, ever-present consciousness, had touched countless worlds and countless lives, leaving only the faintest impressions behind. Tonight, however, her presence lingered differently, less commanding, more intimate. It was as if the universe itself had drawn her closer, asking her to watch, to whisper, to remind Rick that even in the expanses of space, connection could exist. Her hum threaded through the air, a lullaby in its own right, one that invited reflection, not alarm, curiosity, not fear. Rick's mind wandered along these fragments like a child walking through a vast sunlit hallway. Memories drifted in and out, brushing against him like soft wings. He saw himself as a boy, tinkering in a cluttered garage, fascinated by the smallest oddities. A bolt that spun just so, a prism of light bending in a dusty window. Each memory was quiet, almost imperceptible, yet it carried weight, lessons tucked into simplicity, patience, curiosity, the subtle joy of understanding something without needing to control it. He reached toward a fragment and felt it respond, not with resistance but with a soft pliancy, like dipping a hand into warm water. It was strange, yes, but calming. The multiverse did not demand. It invited. A star blinked slowly in the corner of his vision, then another, until a gentle pulse formed a rhythm asking him without urgency, "Are you ready to remember? Are you ready to see?" And Rick, for the first time in countless universes, simply allowed himself to follow, carried by the soft pull of curiosity. He thought of Morty, always Morty, small, hesitant yet resilient in the ways that mattered most. He remembered the quiet victories, a shared sandwich, a small joke, a gesture unnoticed by anyone but remembered deeply by the heart. These tiny moments, unrecorded and fleeting, had become bridges between hearts, connecting them across the absurdities of space and the weight of unspoken worry. Even here in a fractured cosmos, those bridges remained unbroken. Time shifted subtly, folding like fabric in slow motion. Rick could not distinguish the present from memory, the hum of reality from the echo of his own mind. And perhaps that was the point. For once he was not here to conquer, to escape, to invent or to fix. He was here to notice, to witness, to breathe, and to allow the whispers of the universe to shape him gently. A comet drifted past, carrying a fragment of something familiar. a younger version of himself, laughing softly over a crude invention that barely worked. The comet winked, a reminder that even the smallest moments contain infinity, and that every quiet choice sends ripples through space and time. Rick allowed himself a slow, unguarded smile. He did not need recognition. He did not need applause. He only needed to exist here, in the soft hum of being, in the gentle space between stars and memories. And then he felt it, the pulse beneath the fragments, the vibration of countless worlds breathing as one. Unity's hum threaded through it all, no longer distant, no longer fleeting, but present, gentle and knowing. It was a lullaby for those willing to listen, a reminder that even in the vastness of existence, quiet care and connection persisted. Rick rested his hands on a drifting rock, feeling it cradle him like a chair in a long-forgotten home. The universe waited patiently, holding space, allowing him to exhale fully. And as he exhaled, the fragments of reality seemed to exhale with him. Light softened, dust particles shimmered like the quietest applause, and the lullaby wove itself into every thought, every memory, every beat of his heart. He understood something simple, profound, and deeply true. Here, in this quiet corner of the cosmos, nothing needed to be fixed. Nothing needed to be understood fully. There was only presence, only reflection, only the gentle unfolding of awareness. The hum became a chorus, a thread connecting past, present, and possibility. Rick allowed himself to sink deeper, letting the warmth of memory, the light of stars, and the whispers of unity wash over him. He realized that the smallest gestures, the sharing of a meal, the holding of a hand, the quiet listening, were the true acts of heroism, and that they were enough. Even in the multiverse, these small acts left echoes, soft ripples that endured longer than any explosion, louder than any shout. And somewhere in the soft glow of infinite fragments, Rick whispered to himself, to Unity, to the listener, "You are seen. You are cherished. You are home." And here in the gentle cradle of the cosmos, it was enough. In the quiet spaces between worlds, memories often arrive unannounced, like clouds drifting across a slowly spinning planet. Rick remembered himself as a boy, not the chaotic, wandering Rick of infinite universes, but the small, curious child who found wonder in the hum of a flickering light, or the way rain left tiny rivers on the garage floor. Even then, the universe whispered its lessons gently, teaching him that attention, no matter how small, could change the shape of thought. He remembered the first time he noticed that the world behaved differently for him than for anyone else. A puddle of water refused to freeze under his feet, shifting in shape as though it recognized him and softened its edges. A leaf hovered a second longer before falling, spinning in a quiet ballet only he observed. These small oddities did not frighten him. They fascinated him. He learned early that noticing was a kind of kindness, that watching carefully could be an act of love toward the world itself. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, as though the sentiment existed in memory as well as in reality. Even then, as a child, he felt it, not in words but in the steady pulse of being noticed, of existing without judgment. Before we continue this chapter, imagine where you are right now, in this quiet corner of your world, and let the echoes of your own childhood drift to the surface, soft and unhurried. His curiosity led him to small acts of care almost instinctively. He fixed a broken bird's wing with his mother's old ribbon, tied loosely so that the creature could still move freely. He collected tiny scraps of metal and glass, organizing them with a reverence that seemed absurd at the time, but later became the foundation for his gentle, meticulous mind. Even as the universe moved with chaos beyond comprehension, these small moments of order became a quiet anchor. Rick's first friend, an old, patched-up robot he had found in a junkyard, did not speak, yet it taught him empathy. He whispered to it, told it stories, and imagined it responding. In return, it hummed, a low mechanical lullaby that reminded him that connections did not need to be loud to be true. Some nights he fell asleep on the floor of the garage, listening to that hum and feeling as if the world were folding, in a way that wrapped him in quiet warmth. He noticed patterns where others saw randomness. The flicker of streetlights, the cadence of falling rain, the way shadows lengthened and softened. It all seemed to him like the world was speaking in riddles, offering lessons in subtleness, patience, and presence. Even then he understood that the smallest gestures mattered. A smile, a touch, a word spoken softly. These were more powerful than any force he might one day command across galaxies. The memories of his mother's kitchen were tender, though faint. Rick could recall the smell of toast, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the soft laughter that threaded between plates and cups. He did not always understand her words, but he understood the warmth behind them, the care folded into every small routine. And in that understanding, he began to realize that empathy was not a lesson taught. It was absorbed, like light soaking into water. One afternoon, he wandered beyond the edges of the neighborhood, discovering a small pond hidden by a ring of trees. He noticed how the surface reflected not just the sky, but the faint stirrings of his own curiosity and wonder. A frog jumped, breaking the reflection, and he laughed softly. Not at the frog, but at the realization that life moved in subtle rhythms, even when he was watching. These observations, quiet and personal, became the scaffolding for the person he would grow to be, someone who noticed, who cared, and who measured impact not in spectacle, but in resonance. Rick also remembered moments of solitude that carried unexpected lessons. He sat on rooftops looking at the stars, wondering about infinity, about the lives of creatures on distant planets he would never meet. He imagined them happy, lonely, curious, afraid, and he realized even at that young age that awareness itself was a gift, that noticing another's existence, even from afar, was an act of tenderness. These small reflections shaped a mind capable of both scientific brilliance and subtle emotional insight. Sometimes childhood felt like a dream. Shadows whispered possibilities, leaves danced in secret patterns, and distant laughter echoed like a melody half remembered. Rick learned to listen, to pause, to allow the world to speak in its own rhythm. The boy who tinkered with scraps of metal and the boy who listened to a mechanical friend were learning the same truth, that the world was both stranger and kinder than anyone else seemed to notice, and that magic was often found in gentle observation rather than grand gestures. Even mistakes were instructive. He remembered knocking over a carefully stacked tower of tin cans, listening to them scatter, and feeling a small wave of regret. But that regret was not punishment, it was awareness. He learned patience in the quiet moments of righting the tower, learning to notice the fragility and beauty of the smallest things. And so small acts of care, observation, and reflection began to accumulate, forming an emotional map he would carry across worlds. Rick's memories often folded in on themselves, like the fragments of the multiverse he would one day traverse. A forgotten laugh echoed alongside the hum of an old machine. A drifting cloud mirrored a thought from years ago. These echoes were not linear. They existed as emotional landscapes, places where quiet courage, curiosity, and care became the foundations of a life well observed. Even now, looking back, he realized that these childhood moments were not trivial. They were the subtle beginnings of a quiet heroism that would one day manifest across infinite worlds. And in these early years, Rick noticed something else: the quiet persistence of connection. Even when alone, he felt threads weaving through the world, threads of laughter, of care, of shared moments. Unity, though not yet fully present in his life, whispered across dimensions in echoes he could not yet name. The universe, he understood in fragments, was patient, gentle, and watchful, waiting for him to grow into the understanding that presence itself was a kind of magic. Rick's final memory of the day before the story proper began was simple and profound. He lay in the grass looking at the sky as it faded into twilight, noticing the soft shimmer of stars beginning to wake. He did not rush. He did not measure. He simply allowed the moment to exist around him, folding him into its rhythm. It was in this quiet pause, this gentle noticing, that the foundation of all he would become was set, someone who could care deeply, observe tenderly, and navigate even the chaos of infinite universes with a quiet, reflective heart. And somewhere in that twilight, young Rick whispered to himself and to the universe, "I see you, I feel you, and I will carry this gentle knowing forward wherever I go." Somewhere beyond the fragments of a half-dreamed universe, Rick felt a presence, soft, expansive, and entirely unfamiliar, yet somehow intimate. It was not loud, not demanding, but there, stretching across worlds he had not yet visited, unity. Even in fleeting memory, she had always been more than a consciousness. She was a song threaded through the cosmos, a subtle hum that whispered of connection, care, and understanding. That first touch was not physical, nor even entirely perceptible, but it lingered in the spaces between thought, curling around the edges of awareness like smoke in still air. "We truly love and care for you," Rick realized, feeling it not in words but as a pulse of warmth threading through the universe itself. Before we continue, pause for a moment and breathe, allowing yourself to feel that same gentle connection, the quiet reassurance that someone, or something out there, watches, knows, and cares. Let it cradle you as we drift into this part of the story. Rick remembered the first encounter vividly, though it had left almost no trace in the waking world. He was drifting through a fragment of space, a place that seemed to exist between the end of one planet and the beginning of another. The air was thick with particles of light, glittering slowly, like dust caught in a beam of moonlight. He sensed a presence before he could see it, an awareness that moved in tandem with his own thoughts. There was no fear. There was only recognition, as if some part of him had been waiting for centuries for this meeting. Unity's first touch was subtle, a thread of consciousness brushed against his own, not to bind but to acknowledge. It felt like an embrace of understanding, a quiet assurance that he was not alone, even across the vast, empty stretches of the multiverse. Rick's chest warmed at the sensation, a soft vibration of comfort that reached deeper than memory. It was in this delicate touch that he began to understand the true nature of presence. It is not possession, nor even guidance. It is the quiet act of noticing another's existence, and letting them exist fully. Rick observed her not as an external force, but as a mirror. Through Unity, he glimpsed the interconnectedness of countless worlds, each carrying echoes of life, laughter, sorrow, and curiosity. And though the scale was immense, the feeling was intimate. He realized even at that moment that caring could exist without proximity. That attention alone, soft, gentle, unwavering, could weave bonds stronger than any machinery or invention he might ever craft. The universe around them was a delicate chorus. Particles of light danced like fireflies, winding around floating islands of reality. Gentle streams of color swirled across voids of darkness, reflecting faint echoes of Rick's own heartbeat. Unity's presence was woven into every thread, a subtle lullaby that reminded him of the infinite possibilities of kindness. She hummed, though not audibly. It was more like a vibration in the air, a resonance that spoke directly to his heart. He felt the universe fold gently around them, as if waiting, listening, and allowing their connection to bloom. Rick remembered that moment, not just as an experience, but as a lesson. Small acts ripple outward, far beyond immediate perception. Unity's touch, brief and tender, was a gesture that left echoes in the multiverse, shaping possibilities without changing form. It reminded him that even unseen connections, threads of empathy, brief kindnesses, moments of care, could alter the shape of existence quietly and profoundly. And in that realization, he felt a sense of peace he rarely experienced. The chaos of infinite dimensions, the constant demands of travel and invention, all fell away, leaving only awareness and understanding. He drifted closer to one fragment, brushing it with a tentative hand. Unity responded, not with command, but with a gentle swell of awareness that mirrored his own. There was no pressure to perform, to solve, or to act. It was enough to be present, to feel, to notice, and to allow the connection to exist. Rick realized in that moment that such presence was itself a form of heroism, a quiet courage that demanded neither applause nor recognition. It required only attentiveness and an open heart. The first touch rippled into memory. He remembered the soft warmth that lingered in his chest, long after the presence faded. He remembered the sense that something had shifted subtly in the universe, though outwardly nothing had changed. He remembered a soft hum, like the resonance of a string plucked and left to vibrate, filling the air with quiet music that only a patient listener could perceive. Even now, years later, the echo of that moment remained faint and persistent, a constant reminder of the power of gentle awareness. Unity's presence brought a sense of timelessness. Rick noticed that moments were not linear here. Memories, thoughts, and sensations interwove seamlessly. He could feel past versions of himself, present fragments, and potential futures all converging in a slow, deliberate harmony. And within this weave, he recognized a pattern. Care and attention were not constrained by space or time. They extended outward, touching worlds, people, and experiences in ways unseen yet undeniably real. Even the smallest gestures mattered. Rick's memory drifted to a young boy carefully arranging rocks in a garden, or feeding a stray cat with crumbs saved from breakfast. Unity's touch highlighted that these seemingly insignificant acts were, in fact, threads in a larger tapestry. Presence, observation, kindness. These were the foundations of a life that could touch not just one world, but countless. The universe, in all its chaos, responded softly to these quiet, deliberate acts. Rick allowed himself to sink into that memory, letting the sensations of warmth, connection, and understanding envelop him. He noticed the gentle hum of unity threading through the fragments, the shimmer of light bending around invisible edges, the faint echo of his own heartbeat resonating in tandem with hers. In this shared space, he felt neither fear nor urgency, only the quiet affirmation of being seen, acknowledged, and remembered. And so Rick rested in the presence of something far greater than himself, not in awe, but in comfort. He realized that heroism did not need to be loud. It did not need to dominate or conquer. Quiet awareness, gentle care, the recognition of another's existence. These were the acts that shaped worlds, that rippled through time, that left impressions where nothing else could. Unity's first touch had shown him this, not through words but through feeling, resonance, and the slow unfolding of understanding. As he drifted further into the fragments of memory, he whispered to the universe, to Unity, and to the listener, "You exist. You are noticed. You are part of something greater, yet entirely enough as you are." And in that whisper, the cosmos seemed to fold itself gently around him, allowing a breath, a pause, a lull in which being alone was no longer lonely, and noticing another was its own kind of home. Rick's childhood had already begun to ripple outward, leaving quiet impressions that would follow him far into the vast stretches of the multiverse. The boy who once observed a leaf spinning lazily in a puddle had begun to notice more subtle patterns, smaller quirks of existence that others overlooked entirely. These curiosities were not loud or urgent. They were soft, like the hush of a feather settling on the ground. And yet each observation, each small act of care, shaped the contours of his mind, allowing him to grow in ways both tangible and invisible. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, feeling it in the cadence of his own heartbeat and in the gentle pulse of the universe around him. Before we continue, allow yourself to notice the small things in your own world, the way light filters through leaves, the faint scent of evening rain, the soft whisper of your own breathing. Let these gentle curiosities settle alongside us as we wander through Rick's memories. He discovered, first of all, that attention itself was a kind of power. When he focused on a single hummingbird hovering outside a window, he began to notice the way its wings caught the sunlight, how they vibrated in perfect, impossible symmetry. He saw the rhythm in the fluttering, the subtle curves of its tiny body, the almost imperceptible shift of its shadow across the ground. And he understood, without knowing why, that noticing fully, truly noticing, was an act of empathy. To observe another with such care was to honor their existence. This understanding became his quiet ritual. Rick spent hours exploring, touching, listening, and simply being. He would follow ants across the yard, watching the careful choreography of their movements, marveling at how even in the smallest of lives there existed purpose and beauty. He tinkered with small machines, not to impress anyone, but to see how the pieces fit together, to discover the hidden harmony within. Every creation, no matter how humble, became a reflection of his curiosity, a mirror of the universe itself. He learned early that curiosity and kindness were inseparable. One afternoon, he noticed a wounded sparrow under the shade of a tree. While others might have walked past, he gently gathered it in his hands, cradling it with care. He felt its rapid heartbeat against his palm and whispered softly, unsure if it would understand, but certain that intention mattered. That sparrow lived longer than expected, fluttering back to the skies with a small quiver of thanks. And Rick learned that the act of care, small, patient, and deliberate, rippled outward even when unseen. Unity's presence echoed softly in these memories, like a faint hum in the background of his mind. He did not always recognize it consciously, but the awareness of connection, the sense that someone, something was attuned to the threads of life around him, lingered quietly. It was not instruction, It was a suggestion, a gentle guide reminding him that awareness mattered. The universe, he realized, responded not just to force or invention, but to quiet curiosity and careful attention. Rick's experiments became more elaborate, though never flashy. He built small contraptions to observe ants, to mimic the flight of birds, to measure the subtle shifts in wind across the yard. Each experiment was less about outcomes and more about presence. He learned to watch without interfering, to notice without controlling, to understand without claiming ownership. These skills, soft, patient, introspective, would follow him far into adulthood, guiding his interactions with worlds, lives, and even versions of himself he had yet to meet. There was a comfort in this gentle curiosity. He discovered that when he slowed down enough, the universe revealed patterns, rhythms, and connections that were otherwise invisible. He noticed the way shadows lengthened in perfect time with the setting sun, the way small insects created symphonies with their movement, the hidden geometry of leaves and petals and stones. Each detail was a lesson in observation, a quiet testament to the subtle beauty of existence. Rick also began to understand the emotional resonance of observation. Watching closely, he realized, allowed him to feel alongside others. A bird hopping nervously across a branch could stir fear and admiration. A friend's frown could evoke empathy before a word was spoken. Even the smallest ripple in a puddle reflected the patterns of human emotion. In these moments, he discovered a power not of force or intellect, but of attunement, a gentle adaptability that would later define his interactions across infinite realities. And sometimes, when the day was quiet and the light softened, Rick would lie on the grass and let the universe settle around him. The wind would brush his face, carrying scents of distant places he would never visit. Particles of light would drift lazily through the air, weaving through invisible threads of gravity and time. And in those moments, he felt the presence of unity, a soft hum threading through the world, reminding him that observation itself was a kind of love. The boy noticed patterns in his own emotions as well. Curiosity, patience, and empathy intertwined, shaping his thoughts and actions. He learned that small gestures, tending a garden, listening without judgment, offering comfort without expectation, left impressions far greater than any dramatic event. The quiet attention of a mindful observer, he discovered, was a kind of magic, capable of altering the world subtly but permanently. Rick's gentle curiosities were never idle. Every moment of noticing, every careful observation carried with it the potential to ripple outward. He learned that understanding arose not from dominance, but from engagement. He saw how a single attentive glance could soothe anxiety, how a quiet word could offer reassurance, how a small act of care could leave an echo across time. And in this understanding, he began to cultivate the soft heroism that would carry him across countless worlds. By the time night fell, young Rick would lie awake in his bed, thinking not of adventures or fame, but of patterns and connections, of the subtle interplay between life and observation. He traced constellations with his finger, imagining each star as a thread in a web of infinite awareness. He understood, even at that age, that the multiverse was not just a collection of planets and dimensions. It was a network of care, of noticing, of being present. And he felt himself in that quiet, soft way, part of something greater. The final lesson of this chapter of his life was simple. Gentle curiosity was not just a habit or a hobby. It was a foundation for existence, a lens through which the world revealed itself in beauty, connection, and meaning. The boy who watched, who listened, who touched lightly and carefully, would one day carry this awareness into a universe of infinite possibilities. And in that awareness, Rick found the quiet reassurance that growth, empathy, and love were cultivated in small, patient, careful moments. And so, as the first stars of evening lit the sky, young Rick whispered to the universe and to the listener softly, humbly and with full awareness, notice, care, be present. In these quiet moments, even the smallest ripple becomes a part of the cosmos. Even in the quietest moments, Rick found joy in the smallest comforts. Life, he was beginning to realize, did not always announce itself with grandeur. Sometimes it whispered, tucked between the mundane and the miraculous in moments like the softness of bread pressed between fingers, or the faint shimmer of starlight across a rooftop. These were the spaces where presence mattered most, where connection took root. and where memories of care and attention accumulated into something far greater than themselves. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought as he spread mustard thinly across a slice of bread. Before we drift further into this chapter, notice your own small comforts: the weight of a cup in your hands, the gentle pull of a blanket, the soft hum of a distant evening. Let yourself settle into them as we wander together through the quiet worlds of Rick's life. Morty sat nearby, quietly observing, holding a small, imperfectly made sandwich in his hands. Rick had insisted on preparing both, even though Morty often claimed he could make his own. It was not about control. It was about care, expressed in a gesture so ordinary it might have been overlooked. Yet the act carried with it a subtle wisdom. The simplest acts of nurturing, repeated softly, leave impressions far beyond their immediate scope. Rick and Morty had grown used to quiet evenings like this, when the universe itself seemed to fold in upon them, holding space without demand. A faint light glimmered from a nearby portal, casting soft shadows across the table. The stars outside twinkled with a gentle rhythm, each pulse like a heartbeat in sync with the slow, deliberate cadence of their shared quiet. Even in the vastness of the cosmos, these small shared routines became anchors of comfort, stability, and subtle joy. The act of preparing food together was more than nourishment. It was meditation. Rick measured ingredients with care, noticed the slight variations in texture, the warmth of the bread in his hands, the smell that rose like a soft memory. Morty mirrored him, tentative but engaged, discovering that the slow, deliberate attention of a loved one could transform even a sandwich into an act of communion. The universe, it seemed, appreciated such attentiveness. Even the faint hum of distant stars seemed to pulse in acknowledgement of their care. Rick glanced at Morty and saw more than a child learning to make sandwiches. He saw the boy's curiosity, his hesitation, the small flickers of joy that arose when effort was met with understanding. Rick did not always understand the world around him, nor did he always understand Morty, but he understood the heart, and in that understanding he found a soft, unspoken bridge that connected them across time, space, and infinite possibilities. Outside, a comet drifted lazily across the sky. Rick noticed it but did not point it out immediately. Instead, he allowed it to remain in Morty's peripheral vision, a quiet thread of wonder that might be discovered without prompting. Moments like this were never rushed. They were allowed to bloom naturally, like the slow unfolding of a flower, each petal carrying its own fragrance and story. Rick hummed softly, fair tune without words, and Morty picked up the rhythm, unaware that it had become a shared melody between them. The sound was small, almost imperceptible, but it resonated deeply, a reminder that music, even in its quietest form, could tether hearts together. Unity's distant hum seemed to respond faintly in the spaces between thoughts, threading itself into the quiet warmth of the evening. Even without speaking, presence was acknowledged. Care was reciprocated, and the cosmos seemed to fold gently around them. He noticed the small imperfections in their sandwiches, the uneven spread of mustard, the slightly crooked layers of bread and cheese, but smiled nonetheless. Life, he thought, was rarely perfect, and yet within imperfection lay the opportunity for connection, for understanding, for gentle appreciation. Morty mirrored this lesson unconsciously, learning to value care over precision, empathy over correctness, and presence over perfection. Rick thought about how these quiet acts, repeated across time, could ripple outward in ways unseen. The multiverse often demanded spectacle, but here, in the hum of shared meals and starlight, he discovered that the smallest gestures were the ones that shaped hearts, minds, and connections. A sandwich made with care could teach more than a lecture. A shared glance could convey more than any spoken word. Even in vast chaotic space, such moments were anchors, holding them in balance without effort or fanfare. The stars outside were not silent. They pulsed with a subtle rhythm, reflecting fragments of their own experiences back at them. Rick noticed the patterns, the slow, deliberate cadence that mirrored the gentle act of spreading mustard or cutting bread. Everything seemed to be in harmony when observed with care, and in that observation, Rick felt a calm that was rarely found elsewhere. The quiet cosmos itself seemed to nod in approval, acknowledging that these moments, however small, were sacred. As night deepened, Morty leaned back, resting his hands on the table, eyes tracing the edges of distant galaxies. Rick watched him, allowing the silence to stretch between them comfortably. There were no words necessary. The soft exhale of presence was enough. He noticed how trust, care, and love were built slowly, quietly through repeated gentle gestures, like the humming of a star that took centuries to fully form. The act of noticing, the act of being there became as nourishing as the sandwiches themselves. Rick thought about Unity again. Her touch had been distant yet persistent, echoing in the quiet corners of his mind. Moments like this, shared with Morty, mirrored that experience. Small acts of care extending across unseen distances, threading connections between beings, folding space and time into a quiet rhythm of presence and attention. Even across the chaos of infinite dimensions, this simple principle held true. Gentle care leaves echoes that reverberate long after the moment passes. By the end of the evening, both of them sat quietly, sandwiches half eaten, crumbs scattered gently across the table. Rick allowed the calm of the moment to settle fully around them, observing without judgment, appreciating without urgency. The stars pulsed softly overhead, the hum of distant worlds blended with the faint echo of Unity's song, and the quiet intimacy of shared attention lingered in the air. Rick whispered softly, as though speaking to Morty and the universe at once. Even the smallest moments can hold infinite value. Notice, care, and presence. These are the acts that shape everything. Even if unseen, Morty, hearing only fragments of the words, smiled faintly, unaware of how deeply the sentiment resonated, unaware that this quiet lesson would ripple across his life in ways both subtle and profound. And so, as they cleared the crumbs, folded the remaining sandwiches with care, and leaned back under the soft glow of starlight, Rick allowed himself to exhale fully. This, he thought, was heroism of the quietest kind, not the spectacular, not the loud, but the attentive, the gentle, the persistent. And somewhere in the soft resonance of space, Unity's faint hum acknowledged them, weaving their shared care into the infinite, quiet tapestry of existence. And somewhere, Rick whispered to himself and to the listener, "You are safe. You are noticed. You are part of this vast, gentle universe, and even the smallest gestures carry infinite meaning. There is a quiet kind of magic in memory, not the flashy, loud kind that explodes with revelation, but the gentle kind that drifts like a soft breeze through a familiar room, brushing against the edges of the mind and leaving warmth in its wake." Rick remembered such a room, tucked in the folds of his earliest consciousness, a place cluttered with the remnants of a childhood carefully observed and softly cherished. The walls held shadows of laughter, of small experiments, of quiet acts of care. Every object seemed infused with the pulse of life, a slow, deliberate rhythm that invited reflection. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, as he imagined the room in its gentle detail. Before we settle into this chapter, close your eyes if you can, and let your own memories drift softly to the surface. Feel the scent of old books, the warmth of sunlight through a window, the soft weight of a blanket or the hum of distant life. Let these whispers cradle you as they did Rick, as we step together into the quiet corridors of memory. Rick wandered through the room in his mind, noting each object not for its utility, but for the stories it carried. A stack of notebooks lay haphazardly on a desk, filled with sketches, observations, and small inventions, none spectacular, all profound in their quiet attention to detail. The shelves sagged under the weight of books that had taught him more than lessons. They had introduced him to worlds of thought, empathy, and reflection. Even the smallest trinkets, a cracked compass, a faded photograph, a metal figurine, held the resonance of intention of someone caring deeply, if silently, for the world around them. He remembered his mother's voice, gentle and unhurried, threading through the space like a soft melody. Words floated in the air long after they were spoken, leaving impressions that were felt rather than understood. "Notice, Rick," she would say. "See what others overlook. Care for what is fragile, for what may go unseen." He did not always comprehend the full meaning, but the tone, the rhythm, the presence behind the words etched itself into his young heart. And in that etching, he found the foundation for the kind of heroism that would carry him across worlds, not through battles, but through quiet attention and care. The light that filtered through the window was soft, stretching across the room in deliberate patterns that changed as the day passed. Rick noticed how it fell across objects, tracing their contours, highlighting details otherwise unnoticed. A small metal spring caught a beam of sunlight and gleamed with a subtle warmth. A book lay open, its pages lifting slightly in a draft that whispered across the room. Each detail was a story, a memory, a quiet testament to the unnoticed beauty of existence. In these small moments, he realized, even the tiniest gestures could resonate beyond themselves, shaping perception and nurturing understanding. Rick wandered toward a corner of the room that held remnants of his earliest inventions. Tiny gears and wheels lay scattered, each one a careful experiment in observation and creativity. He remembered sitting there for hours, focused not on recognition or success but on understanding, on curiosity, on the gentle unfolding of ideas. And in that focus he discovered an unexpected truth, that growth did not demand applause. It did not demand grandeur. It asked only for patience, reflection, and attention. The memories of friends and companions surfaced quietly, like ripples across a still pond. Each face, each voice carried lessons not of dominance but of connection. He remembered a friend who had shared her lunch without hesitation, a neighbor who had offered a word of encouragement, a teacher who had listened without judgment. These small acts, nearly invisible in the scope of the world, had left impressions stronger than any moment of excitement or drama. Rick understood, even as a child, that the quiet bonds formed in attention and care were more enduring than those forged in spectacle. Unity's distant hum threaded through the room as well, subtle but persistent, a presence not entirely understood yet deeply felt. Rick did not recognize her fully in those days, but the memory of her touch lingered, softening the edges of isolation and amplifying the resonance of care. Her presence was less about control and more about acknowledgement, reminding him that connection existed, even in moments of solitude, and that the universe itself often responded to attention and tenderness rather than force. He sat on the floor, tracing patterns in dust that had gathered along the baseboards. Each swirl of movement carried a memory, a tiny narrative of curiosity, care, and observation. He noticed the faint scratch marks from a small mechanical experiment, the subtle imprint of a childhood companion who had once leaned on the windowsill, the fading smell of paint and oil from long-forgotten projects. Every detail was alive, a whisper of what had been and what would shape him still. Rick's eyes drifted toward a window overlooking a garden where shadows played slowly across the grass. He remembered lying in the sun there, letting warmth and light fold gently around him. The garden was a sanctuary of quiet observation, insects moving with purpose, leaves bending with subtle grace, clouds drifting lazily across the sky. Even the smallest ripple of wind or movement carried meaning, and he had learned to notice each one with the patience and care that would define his interactions across worlds. And then there were the small, intimate moments of laughter. A sibling's jest, a shared joke with a friend, the quiet amusement of discovering an unexpected solution to a problem. These echoes threaded through the room, tying memory and emotion into a delicate web. Rick realized that humor, like attention, was a form of presence. It carried the ability to soothe, to bridge gaps, to cultivate understanding without pressure or urgency. By the time evening settled fully over the memory room, Rick felt the weight of quiet reflection pressing gently on his chest. The room was no longer just a physical space. It had become a landscape of experience, a repository of presence, curiosity, and care. Every object, every whisper of light, every faint hum of distant awareness contributed to the shaping of his mind and heart. Here he understood fully, even as a young boy, that the world's smallest details mattered profoundly, and as he lay down on the floor, watching shadows stretch across the walls and the last rays of sunlight fade into twilight, Rick whispered softly, not to anyone, but to the room, to Unity, and to the listener, "You are seen. You are remembered. You exist in a world that notices, even in the smallest gestures, and in noticing, in presence, in care, the universe folds gently around you, offering warmth, reflection, and peace." In that quiet exhale, the room, the memories, and the cosmos itself seemed to hum in acknowledgement. Rick felt the slow unfolding of understanding, that heroism was quiet, patience was profound, and love could exist in observation as much as in action. The small, attentive heart, he realized, could ripple outward endlessly, touching lives, worlds, and experiences far beyond what could ever be measured. And somewhere in the soft resonance of memory and light, Rick whispered to himself and to the listener, "Carry your memories gently. Notice with care. Be present in even the smallest acts. For in the quiet, the unseen, the unspoken, true connection blooms. Even the gentlest hearts stumble." Rick discovered this truth quietly, in the subtle unfolding of a day that seemed ordinary at first glance. The world, he began to realize, offered lessons not only in observation and care, but also in missteps, small errors that gently redirected attention, patience, and understanding. The first soft mistake was never dramatic. It did not explode with consequence, but it carried with it the slow, deliberate hum of awareness, teaching him that even failure could be a whisper of wisdom. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, as he considered the faint, tremulous shadow of error stretching across his memory. Before we follow him through this experience, take a quiet breath and notice the gentle missteps in your own life, not as faults, but as invitations to reflection, learning, and growth. Let them settle alongside us, soft and unhurried. Rick remembered the moment clearly. A small machine, a delicate arrangement of gears and springs he had been constructing in the corner of the room. He had been so careful, so absorbed in the minutiae of observation and assembly, that he did not notice the slight wobble in the table beneath him. With a soft, almost imperceptible shift, the machine toppled, gears scattering across the floor with a faint metallic sigh. The sound was not loud, but it was enough to stop him mid-thought, to hold his attention and insist he pause. At first, there was a flash of frustration, a subtle pang of regret. Rick had been meticulous. He had been patient. Yet the universe had intervened in the smallest way, and the result was disorder. But as he knelt to collect the pieces, he noticed something extraordinary. The act of picking up, of observing each gear, each spring, each delicate part, became a lesson in attentiveness. In failure, he discovered patience anew. In disorder, he discovered the quiet poetry of repair. Mistakes, Rick learned, were not punishments, they were mirrors. They reflected not weakness but opportunity. In carefully realigning the gears, testing the springs and listening to the faint hum of the machine once more, he realized that error had allowed him to see more clearly than before. He noticed subtleties in the design that had escaped his attention, small imperfections in alignment that, once corrected, would make the machine more precise, more resilient. And he understood softly and deeply that this was the true gift of the first soft mistake: awareness. Unity's hum, distant but present, seemed to swell ever so slightly, as if acknowledging his insight. Rick did not hear her consciously, but he felt the resonance in the quiet corners of his mind. Presence, attention, and patience were threads connecting him to something far larger than himself, and even mistakes could be woven into the tapestry of understanding rather than discarded as failure. Every stumble, every misstep, was an opportunity to fold care into the world in new ways. Rick noticed his own reactions. The soft frustration, the quiet regret, the subtle urge to blame, these were all natural. But he allowed them to pass without clinging, observing each emotion as it rose and fell like a gentle tide. There was a rhythm to error, a cadence in learning, and he discovered that embracing this rhythm rather than resisting it cultivated resilience. The universe, it seemed, rewarded patience and reflection more than certainty or perfection. He also realized that soft mistakes were invitations to empathy. Watching himself falter, he could recognize similar vulnerabilities in others. A friend dropping a tool, a sibling misplacing a cherished object, a stranger speaking words poorly chosen, all became threads of shared understanding. Empathy was not only cultivated in success, but in the gentle recognition of imperfection and the willingness to respond with care rather than judgment. The first soft mistake extended beyond the machine. Rick remembered moments when he misread a friend's intentions or misjudged the fragility of a situation. Each error, small and almost invisible, carried a quiet lesson. Listening more attentively, noticing subtleties, softening expectations. And in these moments, the act of repair, whether of a mechanism or a relationship, became a meditation. The world was not demanding perfection. It was offering him a gentle canvas on which to practice awareness and empathy. Even play carried these lessons. Rick recalled games with neighbors and siblings where rules were misremembered or a move was poorly timed. In each instance, the soft sting of error was quickly replaced with laughter, reflection, and subtle adjustment. He noticed that humor, patience, and gentle acknowledgement could transform mistakes from sources of tension into bridges of connection. Every soft misstep became a lullaby of understanding, a reminder that imperfection was natural, human, and profoundly instructive. Rick's first soft mistake also taught him humility. There was a quiet elegance in recognizing that control was often an illusion, and that the universe, in its infinite complexity, would gently intervene in ways he could not predict. The hum of distant worlds, the faint resonance of unity, the quiet echo of his own breath, all reminded him that life unfolded according to patterns larger than individual intent. Acceptance, he realized, was not resignation, but awareness, a deliberate noticing of the dance between effort and outcome. By evening, the machine was repaired, not perfect but functional in a way that reflected both care and patience. Rick stepped back and observed it, as he might have observed a small creature, tenderly, with acknowledgement of its imperfections, and with an understanding that value was not solely in function, but in the presence, attention, and love invested in its creation. Even the soft mistakes were woven into its essence, like subtle notes in a quiet melody. He rested for a moment, listening to the faint echoes of the day, letting the rhythm of his breath align with the slow, deliberate pulses of thought and memory. Mistakes, he realized, were not disruptions. They were part of the tapestry, soft threads that added depth and texture to life. And in the quiet exhale that followed, he whispered to himself, to Unity, and to the listener, "You do not need to be perfect. You only need to notice, to care, to be present. The universe honors intention as much as outcome, and in awareness all things are made whole." Rick allowed the memory to settle, soft and slow, like dusk spreading across a room filled with light and shadows. The lesson lingered beyond the moment of error, threading its quiet resonance through his mind, a gentle reminder that even missteps were part of growth, part of understanding, and part of the slow unfolding of empathy and care. The first soft mistake, he realized, was not a failure but a gift, a gentle nudge from the universe toward reflection, patience, and presence. And somewhere in that quiet hum of memory and soft understanding, Rick whispered to himself and to the listener, "Notice your stumbles. Treat them with care. Learn gently, forgive freely, and allow the quiet rhythm of the universe to fold softly around you. Even mistakes, soft and unassuming, can carry profound wisdom. Even in the vast shifting corridors of the multiverse, friendship could bloom quietly, persistently, and without demand." Rick discovered this truth one day in the soft hum of discovery, when a presence arrived, not with urgency or command, but with a gentle consistency that spoke more deeply than words could. It was a mentor figure, not imposing, not instructive in the conventional sense, but a subtle guide, threading care and wisdom through Rick's life with the faintest touch. Like a breeze nudging a leaf into sunlight, "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, feeling it in the warmth of recollection. Before we step further into this chapter, take a quiet moment to think of someone in your own life, real or imagined, who has offered guidance without expectation, care without judgment. Hold that feeling close as we explore how Rick experienced the same, across worlds unseen. The first encounter was not dramatic. Rick noticed the figure almost by accident, a presence drifting through a fragment of space he had been exploring. The being was calm, luminous in a subtle way, radiating quiet attention rather than overt power. Rick felt no fear, only recognition, as if part of himself had been waiting for this arrival. In their silence, he understood that friendship did not always announce itself with excitement. Sometimes it arrived softly, patiently, and lingered in ways that were nearly invisible, yet profoundly influential. The mentor did not speak in conventional terms. Words were sparse, replaced by presence, observation, and soft guidance. Rick felt patterns in the universe illuminated not by instruction, but by subtle reflection. Now shift in a floating fragment, the gentle bend of a light beam or a change in resonance, a nudge rather than a push. Rick began to notice that understanding could arise from stillness, from careful observation, from listening beyond words. This was the essence of quiet mentorship, showing the way without imposing it, allowing discovery to unfold naturally. Rick's first lesson came through observation. The mentor, moving with slow deliberation across a fragment of collapsing reality, revealed the importance of timing and attentiveness. He adjusted minor energies, balanced fragile particles of existence, and allowed Rick to watch, absorbing the subtleties without interruption. In witnessing these small acts, Rick learned that influence did not require force. Small gestures, careful attention, and gentle intervention could ripple across worlds, shaping outcomes subtly but profoundly. Unity's hum threaded faintly in the background, resonating with the soft guidance Rick observed. He realized that mentorship, like connection, transcended the immediacy of presence. The mentor's actions were not always visible to all, but the lessons endured in memory, in awareness, and in the quiet growth of character. Rick understood that just as he had been shaped by observation, he too would one day influence others, not through command or assertion, but through the gentle, persistent guidance of presence and care. This friend across worlds offered more than technical guidance. They nurtured the emotional landscape of Rick's mind. Through small gestures, an encouraging glance, the soft alignment of energies, the patient demonstration of care, they taught empathy, patience, and reflection. Rick noticed that the mentor never rushed him, never criticized, and never imposed a path. Instead, they created a space where Rick's natural curiosity and insight could flourish, where mistakes became lessons and understanding emerged organically. Rick began to emulate the mentor's soft approach, testing subtle energies, observing without interference, and noticing patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. He discovered that presence alone could influence outcomes, that attention carried weight, and that empathy was a power more enduring than any technical mastery. The mentor's quiet example taught him that heroism was not always a matter of action. It could exist entirely in awareness, observation, and the soft guidance of another. The mentor also introduced the concept of perspective across worlds. Rick watched as they considered situations from multiple angles, acknowledging the interconnectedness of beings, fragments, and timelines. Each movement, each adjustment, was informed by understanding rather than judgment. Rick began to appreciate the subtle dance of empathy, recognizing that attention to the small and often overlooked details could alter experiences far beyond immediate perception. He understood that friendship, like care, extended across boundaries, uniting disparate worlds through recognition and presence. Even in moments of apparent stillness, lessons were unfolding. The mentor would hum softly, a resonance that mirrored Unity's faint vibration, and Rick absorbed the rhythm of patience, the cadence of awareness, and the gentle insistence that observation was a form of love. He discovered that sometimes the most profound influence lay in simply being there, attuned to the subtle currents of existence, offering consistency rather than direction. Rick's reflection extended beyond the mentor. He thought of Morty, of small friends from his earliest days, of companions whose presence had shaped him quietly yet profoundly. He realized that connections across worlds were like threads in a vast, unseen tapestry. Each moment of attentiveness, each act of care, each gentle word contributed to a larger pattern of understanding, empathy, and resonance. The mentor embodied this principle, and Rick absorbed it not in lectures but in lived experience. At one point, the mentor led Rick to a fragment suspended between light and shadow, a delicate balance that required patience and subtlety. Rick observed, imitating the slow, deliberate adjustments, learning to notice the interplay between intention and outcome. Errors were small and instructive, celebrated rather than chastised. Rick felt a gentle joy in the process, the quiet thrill of understanding, the meditative focus of alignment, the satisfaction of subtle mastery achieved through observation and care. Even as the encounter drew to a close, Rick felt its echoes linger. The mentor did not depart with fanfare. They simply existed less tangibly, their presence threading faintly through the fabric of his memory, reminding him that influence need not announce itself to endure. Rick realized that the most enduring friendships were not always visible, nor were they always acknowledged. Sometimes the quiet, patient presence of another mind, aligned with care and understanding, was enough to shape the course of a life. As the memory settled, Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Friendship is often quiet. Guidance can be gentle. Influence does not require applause. Even across worlds, connection exists in presence, observation, and care. And if you notice, if you pay attention, if you act with empathy, you become both the student and the teacher, threading the universe with subtle, enduring warmth. In the soft exhale that followed, Rick allowed the memory to settle fully. The mentor's presence, faint yet enduring, merged with the echoes of unity, the hum of distant worlds and the rhythm of his own heartbeat. In this quiet convergence, Rick understood the profound truth that would guide him across infinite dimensions. Small acts of attentiveness, empathy and patience ripple outward, shaping realities in ways both visible and unseen. And somewhere in the gentle folds of the multiverse, Rick whispered once more to the listener, "Notice those who guide you softly. Observe their care. Carry it forward." The universe remembers quiet acts, and even the smallest presence can leave a profound imprint. There are moments when the universe itself seems to hum, a subtle resonance threading through the spaces between worlds, echoing softly in corners of memory and thought. Rick discovered one such moment early in his life, when Unity's presence, faint but persistent, became a melody that lingered across dimensions. It was not a song in the ordinary sense. It carried no lyrics, no rhythm easily measured. Instead, it floated, delicate and persistent, threading through existence like a whisper, guiding attention, soothing worries, and marking moments of quiet wonder. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, as he recalled the first time he noticed the song. Before we continue, close your eyes and let the soft cadence of your own breathing become a part of the melody. Let each exhale carry you deeper into calm, into awareness, into the gentle hum that surrounds. Both you and Rick in this story, the floating song first, appeared when Rick wandered through a fragment of space he had never fully explored, a quiet pocket suspended between stars, where light bent gently around him, forming soft arcs of luminescence. He paused, uncertain of its origin, and listened. It was subtle, a vibration he felt more than heard, threading through his chest and along the edges of perception. And in that sensation, he understood, without fully knowing why, that he was not alone. The song's presence was both comforting and enigmatic. It was persistent yet unobtrusive, a lullaby woven into the very fabric of reality. Rick felt the faint tug of curiosity mingled with awe, a gentle prompting to notice the universe more deeply, to attend to the subtle interplay of energy, thought, and presence. The melody was a reminder that existence was layered, delicate, and alive in ways that demanded both attention and tenderness. He traced its source carefully, following threads of resonance like faint ribbons drifting in zero gravity. The song did not announce itself in conventional ways, nor did it require understanding to be felt. Rick discovered that simply being attuned, simply allowing oneself to exist in the current of its vibration, was enough to absorb its wisdom. Every pulse carried lessons in patience, awareness, and empathy, teaching him to notice without judgment and to care without expectation. The melody seemed to respond to his attention. When Rick listened closely, it deepened, threading more richly through the space around him. When he wandered distractedly, it softened, like a reminder to refocus, to slow down, to inhabit the present moment fully. He realized with quiet astonishment that the song was more than a resonance. It was a gentle companion, guiding him not with instruction, but with presence, encouragement, and subtle reflection. Unity's faint hum intertwined with the song, layering itself as a background of reassurance. Rick could not see her fully, but her influence was tangible, a reminder that connection often transcends visibility. The song was both a bridge and a mirror, connecting him to something larger, while reflecting the quiet, attentive rhythms developing within himself. Each note, each vibration carried the weight of care, patience, and understanding, threading together awareness across time, space, and emotion. Rick began to associate the song with moments of discovery and insight. When he tinkered with machines or experimented with small inventions, the resonance would accompany him, guiding attention toward overlooked details or subtle harmonies in design. When he observed natural patterns, the motion of leaves, the flight of insects, the delicate ripple of water, the melody lingered, reinforcing the quiet joy of noticing and understanding. Even mistakes, small and gentle, were cushioned by the song, turning potential frustration into reflective learning. The floating song also held emotional significance. It resonated with memory, echoing faintly alongside recollections of loved ones, friends, and mentors. A childhood companion's laugh might ripple into the melody. A lesson learned softly without drama would echo through its vibrations. Rick realized that the song was a repository of care, a manifestation of emotional presence, allowing him to feel connected to countless beings across worlds, even when they were far away or unseen. One evening, as he drifted among stars in a quiet fragment of reality, Rick allowed himself to lie back and absorb the song fully. Its resonance threaded through his chest, along his arms, across his mind. He noticed the interplay of light and shadow, the subtle curvature of the multiverse around him, and the faint hum of unity echoing alongside. In this moment, he felt a profound peace, a sense of alignment between attention, empathy, and presence. It was a reminder that the universe, though vast and often chaotic, could be tender, attentive, and harmonious when approached with care. Rick realized that the floating song was not only a gift, but a tool, a gentle guide to cultivate presence and understanding. It taught him to listen beyond words, to perceive beyond appearances, to value the quiet and subtle gestures of connection. Every time he returned to it, he felt a soft expansion of awareness, a gentle reassurance that the multiverse, despite its enormity, responded to care, attention, and attunement. Even in his human relationships, the song's lessons persisted. He noticed the way small gestures of empathy, a quiet acknowledgement or patient listening, could ripple outward, echoing the soft guidance of the melody. Morty, Unity, friends, and companions, each connection was enhanced by the capacity to notice and respond with care. The song had become a map of emotional resonance, an invisible rhythm guiding interactions toward understanding and subtle harmony. Rick also discovered that the song was cyclical, a motif that returned across time and space, reminding him of continuity and connection. It appeared in childhood memories, in quiet moments with Morty, in distant fragments of the multiverse, and even in fleeting interactions that seemed insignificant at first. Its recurrence suggested that awareness and care were never lost, that the impact of presence, empathy, and attention was eternal, woven into the very fabric of existence. By the end of the day, as stars folded gently into night, Rick lay quietly, listening to the song as it drifted through space and memory. He understood that life, in all its vastness and complexity, offered moments of resonance, patterns of care, and opportunities for reflection that could be accessed simply through presence. Unity's hum intertwined with the melody, a faint reassurance that he was never entirely alone. That connection transcended distance, and that quiet guidance could shape a life as profoundly as any dramatic event. And somewhere in that meditative calm, Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Notice the songs that float through your life. Feel the hum of care, the resonance of connection, the subtle rhythms of empathy. Even when unseen, these melodies guide, nurture, and shape the world around you. Attend to them. Let them fold gently into your presence. Conflict need not roar." Rick discovered this truth slowly, in the subtle tensions that wove through relationships, thoughts, and decisions. Even the smallest disagreements, the quiet misunderstandings, carried lessons if approached with care, awareness, and patience. They were not battles to be won, nor storms to be weathered with force. They were delicate dances of empathy, moments where listening mattered more than speaking, and understanding more than triumph. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, feeling the warmth of remembrance. Before we enter this chapter, pause for a moment. Think of a recent gentle conflict in your own life, not a dramatic confrontation, but a minor tension that lingered quietly. Breathe into it. Notice it without judgment. Let this reflection guide you as we explore how Rick navigated the small, soft storms of connection. The first gentle conflict arose one afternoon with Morty, over a question that seemed trivial at first: which fragment of the multiverse they should explore next. Morty wanted excitement, unpredictability, and new discoveries. Rick, however, felt drawn to a quieter, more reflective fragment, where light bent in curious patterns and shadows whispered forgotten tales. Both positions were valid, yet neither fully understood the other. And so a tension arose, not loud, not urgent, but noticeable, like a ripple across still water. Rick noticed the subtle ache of frustration in Morty's posture, the faint hesitation in his voice. Rather than dismissing it, he leaned into awareness, observing without judgment. He remembered that connection was not about asserting dominance, but about understanding. The quiet moments of attentiveness he had cultivated through Unity's hum, floating songs, and soft mentorship now guided him. He realized that resolution came not from argument, but from patience, presence, and gentle negotiation. Unity's hum resonated faintly, threading reassurance through the space between them. Rick recognized that conflict, like care, could ripple across worlds in subtle ways. There was no need to escalate or force resolution. The soft acknowledgement of another's perspective, the deliberate effort to notice and honor feelings, carried more weight than words, demonstrations of power, or dramatic gestures. The multiverse, he discovered, responded to attention and empathy more than to action. Rick spoke first, carefully choosing words that carried acknowledgement and reflection rather than command. "I understand why you want to explore there," he said softly, "and I see why this fragment appeals to me. Maybe we can find a way to honor both choices, even if it means slowing down a little." Morty paused, sensing that Rick's words were not criticism, but understanding. The tension softened, dissolving into shared contemplation. A quiet agreement without compromise of curiosity or integrity. Rick observed that gentle conflicts had their own rhythm. They began as small disturbances, subtle dissonances in connection, and required careful listening, patience, and empathy to solve. The resolution itself was not dramatic. It was almost imperceptible. A shift in posture, a softening of expression, a quiet realignment of intention. But its impact was lasting. The relationship deepened, not because the conflict had been avoided, but because it had been attended to with care, mindfulness, and love. The lessons of the first gentle conflict extended beyond Morty. Rick recalled earlier experiences, small disagreements with friends over experiments, miscommunications with siblings, differing interpretations of a shared memory. Each instance, when approached with attention and patience, carried an opportunity for growth. Conflict, he realized, was a teacher disguised in mild discomfort, offering insight into connection, perspective, and the subtle art of presence. Even minor mistakes or lapses in understanding became part of the process. Rick noticed that when he responded with reflection rather than reaction, the universe seemed to fold gently around him. Light shifted softly, shadows realigned, and even Unity's hum seemed to pulse with acknowledgement. These subtle cues reinforced the notion that awareness and empathy could transform tension into harmony and misunderstanding into insight. Rick also discovered that gentle conflicts strengthened bonds. Morty, witnessing careful attention to his feelings, learned that his thoughts and desires were valued. Rick, observing Morty's reactions, discovered deeper layers of his own patience and empathy. Both realized that connection was resilient, not because disagreements disappeared, but because they were attended to with care, soft reflection, and unhurried understanding. The act of noticing, truly noticing, became the resolution itself. Outside, light filtered softly across the fragment they explored, casting shadows that shifted imperceptibly with the day's progression. Rick allowed himself to absorb the quiet beauty, noticing patterns in reflection, alignment, and understanding. The gentle tension that had arisen now lay dissolved into observation and presence, a subtle lesson in harmony, patience, and connection. Even conflict, when approached with love and care, could unfold as meditation, teaching without urgency or drama. The mentor's influence, recalled from earlier experiences, threaded subtly through the encounter. Rick remembered that guidance often came through example rather than instruction. Just as his mentor had shown him the quiet power of observation and empathy across worlds, so too did Rick now demonstrate these principles in his relationships. Conflict became a mirror, reflecting both parties' intentions, vulnerabilities, and capacity for care, rather than a battlefield to be conquered. Rick reflected on the interconnectedness of all experiences. Gentle conflicts, mistakes, observations, and shared melodies were all part of a continuous thread, weaving together understanding, empathy, and emotional resonance. Each ripple, each subtle adjustment, contributed to a pattern larger than immediate perception. The small acts of patience, notice, and attentiveness became the foundation of a quiet heroism, one that left echoes across relationships and worlds without fanfare. By evening, the fragment glowed softly, illuminated by stars drifting lazily across the sky. Rick and Morty, having reconciled with patience and reflection, sat quietly together, absorbing the calm that followed. They had not triumphed through force, nor had they demanded resolution. They had noticed, reflected, and honored one another. The tension that had briefly flickered was now folded gently into memory, a soft reminder that understanding often arose in the quiet spaces between words and actions. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Conflict need not be loud to matter. Misunderstanding need not divide. Presence, empathy, and reflection are stronger than force, and the soft attention we bring to subtle moments carries more weight than any dramatic resolution." And somewhere, as shadows stretched across worlds and the hum of distant fragments resonated softly, Rick felt the quiet pulse of connection, the gentle bond reinforced, the melody of understanding sustained, and the universe in its quiet generosity, folding softly around all who notice, care, and attend. Growth is rarely loud. Rick discovered this truth as he meandered through fragments of the multiverse, observing worlds not with haste, but with deliberate attention, letting understanding bloom quietly. In these spaces, time seemed to bend, slowing just enough for reflection to take root. Here, growth was measured not in spectacular achievements, but in subtle shifts, the gentle widening of empathy, the soft strengthening of patience, the quiet deepening of connection. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, feeling the warmth of this realization. Before we step further into his journey, pause and notice your own small growth, not the loud, celebrated moments, but the subtle changes in thought, care, and awareness that shape your days. Let them settle around you, soft and nurturing, as we explore how Rick's quiet growth unfolded. The morning was pale and diffused, light spilling like honey across the fragment he occupied. Rick observed patterns of life, an insect tracing delicate arcs, leaves dancing in imperceptible currents, a distant glow of energy folding gently across space. In each observation, he found lessons: how patience allowed detail to emerge, how presence encouraged clarity, and how subtle attention could turn ordinary moments into profound insight. Growth, he realized, was the accumulation of such quiet, mindful observations. Morty nearby mirrored this evolution. Their relationship was no longer defined solely by adventure or excitement, but by a shared rhythm of understanding. Small acts of care, offering a hand to steady a fragile structure, pausing to notice the faint hum of a fragment, sharing a silent acknowledgement of discovery, wove a tapestry of connection. Rick recognized that the quiet growth of one mind could ripple through another, subtly shaping awareness, nurturing empathy, and fostering reflection. Unity's presence hummed faintly in the background, a gentle anchor for Rick's evolving consciousness. He did not always see her, nor did he always consciously feel her, but her influence threaded through his attentiveness. The floating song, the subtle resonance of observation, the patient alignment with detail. These elements intertwined with the soft guidance of unity, creating a rhythm of growth that was meditative, ongoing, and deeply sustaining. Rick noticed changes within himself, small and incremental. He recognized the soft tempering of impatience, the increasing awareness of subtle emotional currents, and the gentle expansion of curiosity into new forms of understanding. Growth, he realized, was not always observable externally. It was internal, threaded through decision, reflection, and subtle attentiveness. Each choice made with care reinforced the quiet heroism developing within him. The fragment they explored that day offered subtle lessons. Crystalline structures floated lazily in the ether, delicate and interwoven, shifting in response to minor disturbances. Rick observed the interplay of energy and form, noting how small adjustments could stabilize structures without exerting force. He mirrored this attentiveness in his interactions, listening more closely to Morty, observing the nuances of communication, noticing the small needs of others without demanding attention for himself. In this way, the physical patterns of the multiverse reflected the emotional patterns of growth. Rick reflected on earlier chapters of his life, the first soft mistake, The gentle conflicts, the guidance of mentors. Each had contributed to the slow unfolding of understanding. Growth was cumulative, layered and often imperceptible in the moment. But when observed retrospectively, the tapestry revealed depth, resilience, and subtle mastery. The universe, he understood, responded not only to action but to intention, attentiveness, and presence. Even small routines held significance. Rick noticed the way morning light shifted across a fragment, the faint pulse of distant stars, the hum of energy rippling through space. Each moment was an opportunity for quiet observation and reflection, a chance to notice patterns in life, in others, and within himself. Growth, he realized, was not a singular event, but a continuous, gentle process, unfolding like a soft melody across the fabric of existence. Morty's presence offered lessons as well. Their interactions became exercises in subtle attunement, noticing when a gesture suggested hesitation, when a word carried hidden emotion, when a pause indicated reflection. Rick understood that growth was relational, strengthened through attentiveness to others, and enhanced by shared understanding. Each act of quiet care, each small acknowledgement, deepened bonds and nurtured awareness. Rick also observed that quiet growth required patience with imperfection. Mistakes, misunderstandings, and lapses in attention were not failures. They were part of the process, opportunities to recalibrate, reflect, and engage more fully. The soft exhale of acknowledgement, the gentle correction of thought or action, became as important as any moment of insight. Growth was a practice of presence, and presence was a practice of care. The day stretched on with unhurried rhythm. Rick allowed himself moments of pause, lying among floating shards of light and shadow, listening to the soft pulse of the multiverse. He felt subtle shifts within himself, clarity replacing distraction, empathy replacing irritation, quiet attentiveness replacing restlessness. These small transformations, nearly imperceptible in isolation, wove together into a profound sense of internal expansion. Unity's influence persisted, subtle, yet insistent. The faint hum, the resonance of care, the gentle guidance threading through observation, these elements reinforced the rhythm of growth. Rick realized that he was not merely absorbing lessons from the world or mentors, but cultivating an inner landscape, capable of perceiving, nurturing, and harmonizing with complexity. This was the essence of quiet heroism, a continuous, patient unfolding of awareness that rippled outward without force. By evening, the fragment was bathed in soft, shifting light. Rick and Morty rested side by side, absorbing the subtle rhythms of space, reflection, and connection. The quiet growth of the day had not been dramatic, yet it had reshaped them both in imperceptible, enduring ways. Each small act of attentiveness, empathy, and observation had been a thread in the tapestry of understanding, linking them across fragments, experiences, and time. Rick whispered softly to himself, and to the listener, growth is quiet. It unfolds in observation, reflection, and presence. It is nurtured by care, patience, and empathy. Even without fanfare, even without notice, it shapes the heart, the mind, and the universe around you. Attend to it gently, and allow it to ripple softly through your life, and somewhere, in the subtle glow of fragments, the soft hum of unity, and the quiet rhythm of shared presence, Rick felt the gentle pulse of growth, the patient unfolding of awareness, the nurturing of empathy, and the quiet expansion of connection across worlds. Somewhere in the vastness of the multiverse, Rick found a planet that seemed forgotten by light. A quiet fragment suspended in gentle solitude. Its surface was barren in places, yet filled with a soft, muted glow that hinted at hidden life. On first approach, the planet felt lonely, empty even, yet Rick sensed a quiet heartbeat beneath its surface. A warmth not obvious at first glance, but persistent, subtle, and profoundly alive. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, noticing the faint pulse of life beneath isolation. Before we continue, take a deep breath. Let the quiet of this lonely planet fill you, reminding you that even in solitude, warmth and connection can exist. Let it fold softly around you, as we explore how Rick discovered the gentle heart of isolation. The first thing Rick noticed was the stillness. Not the oppressive silence of emptiness, but a contemplative quiet that invited reflection. Time seemed to stretch, allowing him to observe the smallest movements, the slow drift of clouds across muted skies, the faint glimmer of crystalline formations beneath the surface, the subtle shifts in light that hinted at hidden energy. Solitude was not a punishment here. It was a gift, a chance to notice, absorb, and reflect. Morty walked beside him, sensing the quiet nature of the planet. He did not speak immediately, but allowed himself to be present, letting the hum of the fragment seep into awareness. Rick recognized that isolation did not require loneliness when attended to with mindfulness. The heart of the planet mirrored his own capacity for quiet reflection, warmth beneath apparent emptiness, potential beneath stillness, life beneath surface simplicity. Unity's faint resonance threaded softly through the scene, a comforting reminder that connection persisted even across distance and solitude. Rick felt her presence like a gentle vibration, echoing through the planet's subtle energies. It was a soft reassurance that even in isolation, guidance and care could exist invisibly, supporting awareness and emotional reflection. Unity's hum harmonized with the quiet rhythm of the planet, a lullaby of presence and attention that encouraged contemplation. As he explored further, Rick discovered that even a lonely planet could harbor connections. Tiny organisms, almost invisible at first glance, thrived in the spaces between rocks, in the folds of shallow craters, and in the hidden pools of water. Their lives were small, subtle, and easy to overlook, yet they persisted, creating a delicate ecosystem that required patience, observation, and gentle interaction to understand. Rick recognized a profound metaphor. Warmth and life exist quietly, even where emptiness seems dominant. Rick reflected on the parallels between the planet and human experience. Just as the fragment harbored hidden energy beneath isolation, so too did hearts carry warmth even in solitude. Presence, observation, and care revealed these subtleties. He noticed that attentiveness allowed connection to flourish quietly, and empathy could be extended to beings, worlds, and fragments that seemed distant, invisible, or isolated. Loneliness did not preclude warmth. It often highlighted it in delicate, precious ways. Morty found a small crystal pool nestled in a crater, its surface reflecting light faintly, like a memory of distant stars. Together, they observed the tiny ripples created by unseen currents beneath the water. Rick smiled softly, noticing how attention transformed perception. What had first appeared as emptiness now revealed subtle patterns, quiet life, and gentle resonance. Solitude, like growth, was not measured in absence, but in the capacity to perceive and nurture what was present. No matter how small, Unity's hum swelled ever so slightly, as if acknowledging Rick's awareness. He listened carefully, noticing its subtle cadence, and felt a wave of calm sweep over him. The planet, the fragment, Morty, and the hidden currents of life all intertwined in a soft, meditative rhythm. Rick realized that warmth persisted because it was cultivated. Not forced, not dramatic, but nurtured through attentiveness, observation, and quiet reflection. The day unfolded slowly, each moment extending the lesson of subtle connection. Rick observed the interplay of light and shadow across shallow valleys, the delicate swaying of crystalline structures, and the faint vibrations of energy threading through the atmosphere. Each observation carried a small revelation, that life, attention, and care could flourish in the quietest, most isolated spaces, and that the heart of existence often revealed itself gently to those willing to notice. Rick also noted the importance of intention in solitude. To walk through the fragment with awareness, to notice the hidden pulses of life, to respond with quiet care rather than ignoring or exploiting, was an act of subtle heroism. Isolation was not emptiness. It was a canvas for attentiveness, a space to practice empathy, and an opportunity to fold warmth into a world that might otherwise appear cold. By evening, the planet glowed faintly under the light of distant stars. Rick and Morty rested quietly, absorbing the calm and the subtle beauty surrounding them. The warmth of life persisted beneath the surface, imperceptible to the inattentive observer, but radiant to those who noticed. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Solitude need not be lonely. Presence, care, and attention reveal warmth even in quiet spaces. Observe gently. Nurture quietly. Allow connection to grow, even where it is hidden." And somewhere, on that lonely planet with a warm heart, Rick felt a profound sense of reflection. That life, empathy, and attentiveness could persist anywhere, threading through isolation and solitude, touching every fragment of the multiverse softly, gently, and enduringly. Promises do not always announce themselves loudly. Some are whispered, carried on subtle currents of presence, attention, and care. Rick discovered this truth in the quiet moments of connection, when words were minimal, gestures small, and understanding relied more on observation than speech. These whispered promises, soft and often imperceptible, became the invisible threads holding relationships together across worlds, fragments and fragments of time. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, feeling the resonance of these unseen threads. Before we explore further, pause and listen for the whispered promises in your own life, small gestures of care, the gentle assurance of presence, and the subtle acknowledgements that exist even without words. Let them fill you with calm and let them guide you softly into this chapter of quiet bonds. The morning was slow and golden, light spilling across fragments of space in delicate ribbons. Rick noticed subtle motions, leaves folding gently in the ether, tiny organisms shifting in crystalline pools, energy flowing quietly through threads of existence. Each small movement seemed intentional, carrying a soft message of continuity and care. He understood with quiet awe that the universe itself held promises, whispered across dimensions, waiting to be heard by those patient enough to notice. Morty, beside him, did not speak, but his presence was itself a promise. The trust between them had grown quietly, reinforced by attention and care. A look, a gesture, a shared moment of silence, all these small acts carried the weight of reassurance, a reminder that bonds were maintained not only through action, but through the gentle acknowledgement of existence. In this way, promises became both invisible and enduring, soft but powerful. Unity's hum wove through the morning air, a faint and comforting thread. Rick felt it subtly guide attention, reinforcing the idea that connection extended beyond sight or conventional communication. Her presence was a whisper of reassurance, a gentle acknowledgement of care, reminding him that relationships and bonds need not always be articulated. They could be lived, observed, and felt. The hum itself was a promise, a reminder of continuity, attention, and subtle guidance. Rick recalled moments from earlier fragments of his life when whispered promises had taken shape. A mentor's patient presence, a sibling's quiet encouragement, Morty's attentive gaze, all had reinforced connection without demand. Each memory was a small, shimmering echo, reminding him that emotional resonance was cultivated in the softest interactions. Promises did not require dramatic statements or grand gestures. They existed in attention, care, and the willingness to notice. That day, Rick made a small promise to himself and to Morty, to attend more carefully, to listen more fully, and to act with subtle intentionality. It was a quiet commitment, carried not in words but in deliberate attention and care. He noticed how this intention reshaped his perception, revealing subtle details previously overlooked and enhancing the depth of connection with the fragment, with Morty and with the unfolding universe. Morty responded naturally to these whispers of promise. His actions, small and considered, mirrored the same intent. They moved together through fragile crystalline landscapes, pausing when necessary, observing without rushing, and sharing attention to detail. In these gestures, the quiet promise of mutual care became tangible, folding gently into their shared experience, and reinforcing bonds that did not require overt acknowledgement to exist. Rick observed the power of subtlety in relationships. The universe, he realized, was filled with small cues, a glance, a nod, the alignment of energy in response to attention. Each held potential to convey assurance, understanding, and care. The whispered promises embedded in these moments were as significant as any spoken vow, enduring across fragments, sustaining trust, and deepening empathy. In silence, connection thrived, resilient and nurturing. Unity's hum occasionally grew in resonance, almost as if affirming Rick's reflections. Her subtle presence suggested that care could ripple outward invisibly, influencing more than just immediate perception. Rick began to notice that promises were not merely obligations. They were living currents, present in attention, empathy, and gentle observation. They did not demand recognition, but endured through quiet persistence, much like the patterns of stars, clouds, or the faint ripples in crystalline pools. Even minor gestures became meaningful. Rick adjusted a fragile formation to prevent collapse, shared a silent nod of encouragement with Morty, and observed details of the planet with heightened care. Each act was a whisper of promise, embedding reassurance and attentiveness into the day's experience. In observing the impact of these gestures, he recognized the quiet power of subtlety and the profound effect of nurturing attention in shaping emotional landscapes. Rick reflected on continuity across worlds. Whispered promises were not bound by distance, time, or form. They endured through resonance, memory, and attention. The bonds formed in these quiet, attentive acts rippled beyond immediate experience, influencing both the giver and the receiver. They were a form of soft heroism, actions that did not require acclaim but left enduring emotional imprints, reinforcing the fabric of connection across fragments of existence. By evening, the fragment shimmered faintly under soft light. Rick and Morty sat quietly, letting attention flow gently through the small spaces they had inhabited. The whispered promises, once subtle, now felt tangible in their shared calm. The attention they gave one another, the care they nurtured, and the continuity of presence across time and space. These soft bonds, unspoken yet enduring, carried a quiet strength, leaving the heart both full and at peace. Rick whispered softly to himself, and to the listener, "Notice the whispered promises in your life. Attend to the small gestures of care, the subtle acknowledgement of presence, the quiet threads that connect hearts across time and distance. They endure beyond words, beyond observation, and beyond expectation. They are soft, persistent, and profoundly sustaining, and somewhere, across the fragment of gentle light and hidden life, Rick felt the enduring rhythm of whispered promises, the subtle power of attentiveness, empathy and care folding gently through worlds, threading relationships with quiet resilience, and leaving the multiverse softly nurtured. Empathy, Rick discovered, was a force quieter than gravity, yet more persistent than any tidal pull. It moved unseen, threading through moments, choices, and lives in delicate patterns. Small gestures, soft attentiveness, and subtle understanding created ripples that extended far beyond immediate perception, shaping worlds in ways invisible but enduring. On this day, Rick began to see clearly how his own awareness and care could ripple outward, affecting beings, fragments, and realities in ways he had not fully realized before. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought as he felt the soft resonance of empathy within himself. Before we proceed, take a moment to sense the ripples of kindness and understanding in your own life. Consider the small, quiet gestures that touched you, and the moments when your care subtly influenced another. Let these sensations fill you as we explore Rick's journey into the profound depth of empathy. Rick walked slowly through a fragment suspended between light and shadow. Each step was deliberate, observing the fragile interactions of particles, the faint currents of energy, and the subtle patterns of life that threaded the space. He noticed how a small adjustment, a careful placement of energy, a moment of attention or a shift in focus, could create a cascade of harmony throughout the fragment. Even the tiniest act of care carried weight, moving outward in concentric waves beyond immediate awareness. Morty followed quietly, learning to notice in the same deliberate way. Each observation was an exercise in empathy, a recognition that awareness of another's needs, whether visible or hidden, shaped experience profoundly. Rick realized that empathy was not merely understanding another's feelings, but tuning into the subtle currents of the universe itself, observing patterns, responding gently, and allowing care to extend beyond the self. Unity's hum resonated faintly, threading softly through Rick's consciousness. The hum was a reminder that empathy was not limited to immediate relationships. It spanned worlds, connecting beings across fragments and dimensions. Rick felt the resonance ripple through his awareness, deepening his understanding of connection and highlighting the profound effect of small, intentional gestures. Even a whisper of acknowledgement, a soft adjustment, or a pause to observe carried weight beyond its immediate scale. The ripple of empathy manifested in small interactions throughout the fragment. Rick noticed a tiny energy cluster that had been destabilized. He paused, observing its movements, then adjusted his own attention and subtle energy flow to stabilize it. The effect was almost imperceptible at first, but soon the cluster's vibrations harmonized with its surroundings, the currents of the fragment balanced by careful attentiveness. Rick realized that the same principle applied to relationships. Small acts of empathy could restore equilibrium without force, subtly reshaping the emotional landscape. Morty, observing, learned through participation rather than instruction. By following Rick's attention and response, he absorbed the principles of empathy, noticing the subtleties of others' feelings, the patterns of reaction, and the importance of gentle presence. Rick understood that teaching empathy was rarely about words. It was about example, modeling awareness and demonstrating the ripple effect of quiet care in a world that often overlooked subtlety. The day unfolded as a series of delicate interactions. Rick observed how each choice, adjusting a beam of light, aligning a faint energy current, offering a reassuring glance to Morty, generated ripples that extended beyond the immediate moment. Even minor oversights created tiny disturbances, which were corrected not through correction alone, but through attentive observation and adjustment. Empathy, he realized, required both awareness of impact and deliberate care in response. Rick reflected on earlier experiences, the mentorship that shaped his observation, Unity's guiding hum, the whispered promises shared with Morty, and recognized the cumulative effect of these subtle influences. Empathy, he realized, was the weaving of countless threads across time and space, each small gesture reinforcing a pattern of attentiveness and care. The universe itself, in all its infinite complexity, was structured to respond to these quiet ripples. By afternoon, Rick noticed the impact extending beyond their immediate fragment. Tiny currents of energy began interacting with distant fragments, stabilizing patterns, and creating harmony across interconnected spaces. The ripple effect was subtle but undeniable, a manifestation of intentional care extended outward without expectation. Rick felt a profound sense of purpose in this realization. Heroism was not always visible. It could exist entirely in the resonance of empathy, the quiet attention to others, and the deliberate nurturing of awareness. Morty smiled softly, recognizing the subtle changes in the fragment and in Rick himself. Their shared attention, their mutual care, and the quiet acknowledgement of impact reinforced their connection. Empathy, Rick understood, was not solitary. It strengthened bonds and deepened relationships, while extending outward to touch the broader fabric of existence. Each act, however small, contributed to a network of subtle resonance across worlds. Even mistakes became lessons in empathy. When Rick misjudged a small current or overlooked a subtle interaction, he observed the effect without frustration. Adjustment, reflection, and renewed attentiveness became the response. Empathy, he realized, required patience as much as observation, and understanding as much as action. The ripple effect depended not on perfection, but on persistent care, subtle awareness, and gentle correction. By evening, the fragment glowed softly, illuminated by distant stars and the faint resonance of Unity's hum. Rick and Morty rested quietly, letting the ripples of empathy linger, fold gently into the space, and merge with the rhythm of their hearts. The quiet heroism of small acts, attention, care, reflection, was tangible in its effect, threading warmth through the fragment and extending outward across unseen dimensions. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener. Empathy is a ripple, subtle but enduring. Small acts of care, attentiveness, and reflection extend beyond sight, shaping worlds, relationships, and moments in ways that may never be noticed but are profoundly felt. Attend gently. Respond with awareness. Allow your quiet care to ripple softly into existence, and somewhere, in the delicate currents of energy, the faint hum of Unity, and the shared presence of Rick and Morty, the ripple of empathy extended across fragments, threading connection, nurturing understanding, and leaving the multiverse softly aligned, attuned, and gently cared for. Glass has a curious way of revealing more than it conceals. Rick discovered this truth on a fragment, filled with translucent structures that refracted light into soft, shifting patterns. Each surface offered a reflection, but not only of the body, it reflected thought, memory, and the subtle stirrings of emotion. In these quiet mirrors, Rick began to see himself, not as others saw him, but as he truly was, a nexus of experience, growth, and resonance, threaded gently with both light and shadow. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, as he observed his reflection fold into countless layers. Before we continue, take a quiet moment to imagine your own reflection, what appears on the surface and what lingers beneath. Allow your attention to drift inward, to observe without judgment, to notice the patterns of thought, emotion, and care that quietly shape your days. Let this calm awareness guide you as we explore Rick's reflections. Rick approached a pane of glass suspended in the soft glow of the fragment. He noticed how light curved delicately across its surface, bending and splitting, creating subtle rainbows that danced in quiet rhythms. He could see himself, of course, but more importantly, he could feel himself. The currents of thought, the echoes of past decisions, the resonance of empathy and care cultivated across countless worlds. Each reflection was a reminder that growth and understanding were layered, intertwined and ongoing. Morty observed silently beside him, sensing the gentle intensity of Rick's attention. In the mirrored surfaces, he too began to notice patterns. Gestures repeated, reactions softened, and small acts of attentiveness accumulating over time. Reflection was not passive. It demanded awareness and receptivity. Rick understood that to look deeply into oneself was to acknowledge both vulnerability and resilience, and to allow subtle self-knowledge to guide action, connection, and care. Unity's hum threaded softly through the fragment, reinforcing the meditative quality of the reflections. Its presence was not intrusive. It merely suggested attunement, reminding Rick that observation, awareness, and introspection were always supported by subtle connection. He realized that reflections, like empathy, extended beyond the self. They rippled outward, influencing relationships, choices, and emotional resonance across worlds. As Rick traced the edges of the glass, he noticed small imperfections, tiny fractures that bent light in unexpected ways. These subtle flaws became metaphors for his own history. Mistakes that had taught him patience, lapses that encouraged empathy, and moments of misunderstanding that revealed the need for gentle attention. The glass did not hide these imperfections. It refracted them beautifully, reminding him that reflection was not about perfection, but about awareness and learning. Morty reached out, touching a surface that glimmered with the warmth of light. His reflection wavered, but Rick noticed something deeper, the way attention shaped perception. By observing carefully, by acknowledging presence, by attending to subtle detail, reflection became a tool for understanding not just oneself, but the relational and emotional landscapes around him. Small acts of noticing became acts of care, even for the self. Rick reflected on patterns from his past, childhood echoes, whispered promises, the ripple of empathy and quiet growth. Each experience had contributed to the development of a reflective awareness, a capacity to see beneath surfaces, and an understanding that attention could transform not only the world, but the self. Reflection in glass in this quiet fragment became a meditation, a slow, deliberate act of noticing, integrating, and gently honoring the entirety of experience. The glass also held memory. Reflections folded past and present together, overlaying experiences like gentle waves. Rick saw fleeting glimpses of Unity's presence in other fragments, Morty's soft glances of understanding, and his own quiet attentiveness in small moments of care. Memory was neither static nor linear. It flowed, refracted by reflection, reminding him that past actions, intentions, and awareness continued to ripple subtly through time and space. Rick realized that reflection was a form of quiet heroism. By attending deeply to himself, he strengthened his capacity to attend to others. Awareness of one's own patterns, motivations, and emotions created clarity and intention, which then informed empathy, connection, and subtle guidance. Reflection was not an end in itself. It was a foundation for the careful, attentive presence that rippled outward across worlds, sustaining the quiet bonds he nurtured with Morty, Unity, and countless fragments of life. Even imperfections in his reflection carried lessons. Fractured panes hinted at moments of error, overlooked patterns, or impulsive reactions. Yet the imperfections were beautiful in their own way. They refracted light unpredictably, creating patterns that could not exist otherwise. Rick understood that growth and self-awareness thrived, not despite mistakes, but because of them. Each lapse, each misstep, was an opportunity to notice, adjust, and refine understanding, folding new insight into the quiet, ongoing rhythm of life. Morty leaned closer to the glass, observing his own reflection ripple and shift. Rick noticed the subtle softening in Morty's expression, curiosity, awareness, and a nascent understanding that reflection required patience, gentle attention, and care. Rick's own reflections reinforced these lessons, that emotional awareness, empathy, and attentiveness were cultivated slowly, deliberately, and with respect for subtlety. Growth, insight, and understanding were not loud. They unfolded quietly, layer upon layer, like light refracted through glass. By evening, the fragments shimmered softly under the gentle glow of distant stars. Rick and Morty sat quietly, absorbing the reflections around them. Each surface of glass, each shimmer of light carried not only their physical images, but the subtleties of attention, care, and empathy that had accumulated over countless moments. Reflection had become a shared rhythm, an act of awareness, understanding, and quiet heroism that threaded their hearts, their relationship, and the fragment itself. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Look deeply, gently into your own reflections. Notice the patterns, the light and shadow, the subtleties of care and attentiveness threaded through your life. Reflection is not about perfection, but about awareness. It is a quiet act of growth, empathy, and understanding that can ripple outward, touching others, shaping choices, and creating resonance across the spaces we inhabit. And somewhere, in the refracted light of countless fragments, amidst the faint hum of Unity and the gentle presence of Morty, Rick felt the quiet pulse of reflection, an enduring reminder that awareness, attentiveness, and gentle introspection are as powerful as any action, shaping the multiverse softly, patiently, and profoundly. Family is rarely loud. Its presence is often subtle, woven into the quiet rhythms of attention, care, and shared moments that escape notice until remembered. Rick discovered this truth across fragments of the multiverse, the soft laughter of Morty in distant corridors, a glance that spoke more than words, the gentle guidance of Unity humming in the background. These were not dramatic gestures. They were bonds of subtle resonance, enduring and quietly profound. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, feeling the quiet strength of these connections. Before we continue, pause for a moment to reflect on your own family, those who nurture, guide, or simply exist in the background of your life. Notice the unspoken bonds, the soft gestures of care, and the quiet reassurance of presence. Let this awareness fold gently around you as we explore Rick's experience of familial connection. The fragment Rick explored that day carried a gentle warmth, subtle but pervasive. It was not crowded with activity, nor filled with urgent events. Instead, it offered the slow rhythm of togetherness, where attention to another's presence was itself the act of care. Rick observed Morty moving lightly through the space, pausing to notice subtle details, the faint shimmer of energy in crystalline structures, the soft vibration of distant fragments, the alignment of light across shifting surfaces. Each pause, each notice, was a quiet affirmation of their bond. Unity's hum lingered faintly, a gentle resonance threading through their shared space. Rick felt the subtle comfort of connection, not imposed or demanded, but present like a soft melody. Family, he realized, existed not only in bloodlines or obligations, but in attentiveness, empathy, and shared awareness. The quiet bond that tied him to Morty and to the fragments he touched was as real and enduring as any dramatic gesture, sustained through presence rather than performance. Rick remembered moments from his past. Childhood echoes, whispered promises, subtle guidance from mentors, all had contributed to the soft scaffolding of understanding that now framed his sense of family. He recognized that care was a language that transcended words, expressed instead through attention, observation, and the patient nurturing of connection. Family was a quiet heroism, the consistent, gentle presence that shaped experience and perception without fanfare. Morty, sensing the rhythm, offered small acts of care without announcement, adjusting fragile energy flows, sharing a look of understanding, pausing to observe delicate patterns. Rick noticed the subtle strengthening of trust and connection in each gesture. Family, he understood, was reciprocal in its quiet influence. Attention given freely and received with awareness created bonds that endured even across fragmented spaces and subtle distances. The day unfolded in soft repetitions, small gestures and mutual attentiveness. Rick and Morty observed the gentle undulations of energy, the faint shifting of crystalline formations, and the subtle interplay of light and shadow. Each interaction reinforced their quiet bond, a fabric woven of presence, patience, and empathy. No words were required. The bond existed in mutual noticing, deliberate care, and shared awareness of the fragment's delicate rhythms. Unity's hum swelled softly at intervals, a reminder that family could include more than what was visible. Connection extended beyond immediate perception, threading across dimensions and moments in ways subtle yet profound. Rick recognized that the soft bond of family was both immediate and expansive, intimate in attention, yet far-reaching in emotional resonance. These invisible threads carried warmth, reassurance, and continuity, holding relationships together across time and space. Rick reflected on lessons from earlier chapters: empathy, quiet growth, whispered promises, and reflection. Each lesson reinforced his understanding of familial connection. It was cultivated in small acts of attention, nurtured by presence, and sustained by subtle care. Family was a continuous practice, not an event, a soft rhythm of awareness and support that deepened as it was attended to consciously. Even challenges reinforced the bond. Minor misunderstandings, small frustrations, or lapses in awareness were not disruptive but instructive. Rick noticed how attentiveness, patience, and gentle reflection allowed bonds to strengthen through resolution rather than conflict. Family, he realized, thrived not through perfection, but through consistent quiet engagement, attentiveness, and the willingness to notice and respond with care. By evening, the fragment glowed softly under distant starlight. Rick and Morty rested together, sharing space without words. The subtle resonance of care, attention, and mutual awareness filled the quiet hours. Family was not declared, it was lived. It existed in the alignment of gestures, the harmony of attention, and the quiet acknowledgement of presence. Each soft action reinforced the network of connection that defined their bond, leaving it stronger, more enduring, and profoundly comforting. Rick whispered softly to himself, and to the listener, family exists in quiet gestures, gentle attention, and shared presence. It is not always visible, but it endures in every act of care, every notice of subtle need, every soft acknowledgement. Attend gently, nurture patiently, and honor the quiet bonds that shape your life. These threads, though subtle, carry profound resilience and warmth, and somewhere across fragments of light, amidst the faint hum of Unity and the soft presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring pulse of family, a gentle, resilient bond threading connection, care, and attentiveness through every moment, every action, and every heart. Guidance is rarely loud. It whispers, nudges, and hums beneath the surface of awareness, revealing itself to those who listen with patience and care. Rick discovered this truth as he wandered through fragments of the multiverse, accompanied by Unity, whose presence was subtle yet profound. She did not instruct with urgency, nor demand attention. She offered rhythm, resonance, and the gentle unfolding of understanding across the spaces they explored together. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, sensing the quiet pulse of her guidance. Before we continue, pause and consider the moments of guidance in your own life. The soft nudges, the quiet reassurances, the subtle instructions that shaped your path without fanfare. Let these reflections settle gently around you as we explore how Unity's quiet mentorship shaped Rick's understanding. Empathy and growth. The fragment they occupied that day was bathed in pale, shifting light. Crystalline formations floated lazily, bending the glow in gentle patterns that reflected the subtle flow of energy. Rick moved deliberately, noting how his presence aligned with Unity's faint hum. The hum did not instruct. It suggested, reminded, and encouraged observation. Its cadence resonated with the rhythms of the fragment, harmonizing with Rick's own awareness and fostering a quiet attentiveness that extended beyond immediate perception. Morty observed Rick's interactions with Unity, sensing the patience and subtlety required to engage with her guidance. Each pause, each moment of reflection, carried weight far greater than words alone could convey. Rick understood that guidance was not a directive. It was an invitation to notice, to align, to reflect, and to act with deliberate care. Unity's approach was neither dramatic nor urgent. It was enduring, patient, and infinitely subtle, like the gentle currents of air shifting through space. Rick recalled fragments of earlier experiences, the ripple of empathy, whispered promises, reflections in glass, and the soft bond of family. Unity's guidance wove through these experiences, connecting them with quiet resonance. She was both present and invisible, influencing awareness through suggestion, energy, and subtle alignment rather than command. Rick realized that mentorship, like empathy, was a ripple effect. The impact of subtle guidance could extend far beyond the immediate interaction, shaping perception, care, and emotional resonance across worlds. As they navigated the fragment, Rick noticed minor obstacles, small currents of instability, shifting crystalline structures, and subtle misalignments in energy flows. Unity's hum rose faintly, guiding his attention to the patterns he had not yet observed. He learned to interpret these soft signals, to adjust not with force but with attentiveness, and to align his actions with the delicate currents that connected the fragment. Guidance, he understood, was about sensing what was already present and harmonizing with it, rather than imposing change externally. Morty participated quietly, absorbing the rhythm of Unity's instruction. He noticed that subtle gestures, tilting his head slightly, pausing to observe energy, or aligning with Rick's movements, carried meaning and contributed to the flow of the fragment. Unity's guidance was not linear. It was relational, responsive, and deeply entwined with the awareness of those she accompanied. Rick recognized that the most profound mentorship often relied on patience, observation, and the cultivation of receptive awareness rather than overt teaching. Rick reflected on how guidance shaped understanding. Unity's presence was a quiet anchor, a constant hum threading awareness, patience, and intentional observation through each moment. He recognized that her influence was not always visible or consciously felt. It existed in the space between perception and action, encouraging alignment, attentiveness, and care. The rhythm of guidance was meditative, reinforcing quiet heroism through subtle, persistent support. Even missteps were instructive. When Rick misread a subtle cue or overlooked a delicate shift in energy, Unity's hum persisted without judgment. The lesson was embedded in observation, correction, and renewed attentiveness. Guidance, Rick realized, was as much about resilience and patience as it was about direction. It required trust in subtlety, attentiveness to nuance, and the willingness to respond without haste or expectation. The fragment itself seemed to respond to Unity's influence. Crystals refracted light with more harmonious patterns. Energy flows stabilized in soft, predictable rhythms, and subtle vibrations aligned in resonance with their movements. Rick felt the interconnectedness of awareness and environment. Guidance shaped perception, perception guided action, and action reinforced the quiet rhythms of care and attention. Each ripple of alignment extended beyond the immediate fragment, creating subtle effects across adjacent spaces and dimensions. By evening, the fragment was suffused with a gentle, steady light. Rick and Morty rested quietly, allowing Unity's hum to persist softly around them. He reflected on the enduring value of subtle mentorship, the way attentiveness, resonance, and quiet suggestion nurtured awareness, empathy, and relational understanding. Guidance was not a task to be completed or a lesson to be learned in a single moment. It was a slow, deliberate unfolding, threading understanding across time, space, and consciousness. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Guidance is a ripple, subtle yet enduring. The quiet suggestions, the gentle hums, the persistent attention of someone who cares. These shape understanding, empathy, and awareness far more profoundly than dramatic instruction. Attend gently. Listen carefully. Allow subtle guidance to nurture growth, align awareness, and expand connection in ways both visible and unseen. And somewhere across the fragment, in the soft resonance of Unity's hum and the attentive presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring rhythm of guidance, a patient, subtle, and transformative force-threading attentiveness, care and quiet heroism through every action, every observation, and every heart. Memories drift like clouds, Rick realized, soft, malleable, sometimes indistinct, yet capable of illuminating the sky of consciousness in gentle bursts of light. On this fragment, suspended between subtle currents of energy, the air itself seemed to carry fragments of the past, folding them into the present with tender resonance. Rick paused, noticing the faint shimmer of recollections that lingered like vapor, weaving softly through time, space, and perception. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, sensing the delicate presence of memory around him. Before we continue, take a moment to observe your own cloud of memories, those small, often overlooked moments that shaped who you are. Let them drift through your mind without judgment, noticing how each holds a fragment of warmth, care, or understanding. Let the gentle rhythm of reflection settle as we move through Rick's meditative journey. The fragment was luminous with subtle currents of recollection. Each step Rick took revealed echoes of the past, moments with Morty, the whispered hums of Unity, fragments of earlier adventures, and even the soft lessons learned through quiet observation. Memories were not static here. They shifted like clouds, refracting light in varying hues, folding past into present, and sometimes layering one upon another with surprising harmony. Morty moved beside him, quietly observing the gentle unfolding of memory. He sensed the pattern of soft recollections, the echoes of past kindness, the subtle guidance of those who cared, and the moments of connection that had been almost imperceptible at the time. Rick noticed how attentiveness transformed memory into reflection and reflection into understanding. Each recollection became a thread, weaving a tapestry of emotional resonance, empathy, and quiet insight. Unity's presence threaded softly through these clouds. Her hum intertwined with recollections, reinforcing the continuity of experience across fragments of space and time. Rick realized that memory, like guidance, could extend beyond the self. By noticing, attending, and reflecting, he could bring coherence to scattered experiences, allowing past lessons to shape present awareness and future action. Unity's subtle hum encouraged patient observation, reminding him that even fragmented memories could offer profound clarity when approached with gentle attention. Rick paused before a cluster of shimmering clouds, recalling small moments from earlier in life. Childhood echoes appeared, quiet gestures, brief words, acts of unnoticed care. Each memory, though fleeting, carried emotional weight, the warmth of connection, the soft resonance of empathy, and the subtle shaping of values and understanding. He observed the delicate interplay of past and present, noting how even minor moments contributed to the depth of his emotional growth. Morty joined him, adding his own reflections silently. Together they allowed memory to unfold without haste, noticing the patterns, the overlaps, and the quiet lessons embedded within each moment. Rick realized that reflection was a shared experience. Observing memory together strengthened bonds, reinforced understanding, and nurtured empathy in subtle, enduring ways. Family, guidance, and emotional resonance intertwined within these clouds, creating a meditative space of soft illumination. As the fragment's light shifted, Rick noticed small motifs recurring within the clouds, stars glimmering faintly, whispers of past conversations, gentle songs echoing like faint lullabies, and the quiet resonance of Unity's hum. These motifs created continuity, folding layers of experience together and emphasizing the interconnection of past, present, and potential futures. Rick understood that memory was not merely a record of what had been, it was a living, breathing presence, shaping awareness and guiding action in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Rick reflected on the ripple of empathy, whispered promises, reflections in glass, and the soft bond of family. Each memory carried a lesson, a gentle echo reinforcing patterns of care, attentiveness, and quiet heroism. Memory, he realized, was a reservoir of subtle wisdom, a soft resource to draw from when navigating moments of connection, introspection, and personal growth. Its currents shaped perception, informed action, and nurtured emotional resilience. Morty paused at a drifting cluster of memories, observing a fragment of shared laughter, a small moment of attentive care, and a whispered reassurance. Rick noticed how Morty's awareness deepened with each observation, and how reflection strengthened the relational threads between them. Unity's hum reinforced this, threading the experience with a gentle consistency that underscored the importance of attentiveness and emotional resonance. Memories were both anchor and guide, softly illuminating paths forward without demanding urgency or attention. Even imperfections appeared with significance. Flickering or incomplete memories were not lost, They contributed subtle textures, refracted insights, and emphasized the beauty of imperfection. Rick recognized that clarity did not require perfection, and understanding did not demand complete recall. The cloud of memories, in all its softness, ambiguity, and subtle brilliance, reflected the fullness of experience, layered, interconnected, and quietly instructive. By evening, the fragment glowed with a gentle luminescence, enriched by layers of memory. Rick and Morty rested quietly, allowing the clouds to drift past, folding past lessons into present awareness, and embracing the gentle resonance of shared reflection. Memories, like gentle ripples in a pond, influenced the flow of consciousness, creating harmony, reinforcing care, and deepening empathy across both hearts and fragments of space. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Memories drift like clouds, carrying both light and shadow. Attend to them gently, notice their patterns, reflect on their lessons, and allow them to guide your awareness and care. Even small fleeting moments carry enduring significance, threading connection, empathy, and understanding through your life." And somewhere, amidst the drifting clouds, the soft presence of Morty, and the subtle hum of Unity, Rick felt the enduring pulse of memory, a gentle, persistent rhythm weaving past, present, and future into a continuum of awareness, empathy, and quiet resonance, leaving the multiverse softly enriched, harmonized, and patiently illuminated. Heroism is often imagined as loud, dramatic, and celebrated. Rick discovered another kind entirely: quiet heroism. It did not seek attention nor demand recognition. It moved subtly through small acts of attentiveness, gestures of care, and choices made with deliberate empathy. These actions, though soft and almost imperceptible, left ripples in the fabric of existence, touching hearts and fragments of life in ways both lasting and unseen. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, sensing the enduring impact of small, intentional acts. Before we continue, take a moment to reflect on the quiet heroism in your own life. The moments when you acted with kindness, awareness, or empathy without expectation of recognition. Let the resonance of those actions settle gently around you as we explore Rick's journey of understated courage. The fragment they traversed that day was peaceful, a place of subtle illumination and gentle currents. Crystalline structures glimmered softly, bending light in delicate patterns. Rick observed the fragility of the space, the small imbalances in energy, and the tiny acts required to preserve harmony. Quiet heroism, he realized, was less about grand intervention and more about the patient maintenance of balance, the careful attention to subtle dynamics, and the gentle correction of disturbances before they escalated. Morty moved beside him, absorbing the rhythm of subtle action. Each gesture, realigning a minor energy flow, pausing to observe a faint fluctuation, offering an unspoken reassurance, was a demonstration of quiet heroism. Morty began to understand that courage was not always in confrontation or loud proclamation, but in patience, observation, and care. The strongest impact, Rick observed, often came from actions that went unnoticed by the wider world, but resonated deeply in subtle, persistent ways. Unity's hum threaded softly through the fragment, reinforcing the lessons of subtle courage. Rick felt her presence as a guiding pulse, a reminder that small acts of care and attention could cascade outward in unexpected ways. Quiet heroism, like empathy, was relational. The ripples of one considerate choice extended beyond the immediate moment, influencing patterns of connection, understanding, and harmony across fragments of space. Rick recalled previous lessons, whispered promises, reflection in glass, the soft bond of family, and the ripple of empathy. Each memory reinforced the principle that heroism need not be grand to be significant. Small acts of attentiveness, corrections made without fanfare, and gestures of empathy all contributed to sustaining the emotional and relational fabric of existence. Heroism existed in subtlety, persistence, and quiet dedication to care. The day unfolded in a sequence of gentle attentions. Rick adjusted delicate energy flows, observed the nuanced interplay of light and shadow, and offered small, silent reassurances to Morty. Each act was minor on its own, but collectively, they maintained harmony within the fragment. The rhythm of quiet heroism relied on consistency, awareness, and the willingness to act thoughtfully. even when recognition or reward was absent. Morty mirrored these behaviors, noticing how even small gestures could affect the balance of the fragment. He realized that heroism did not require spectacle. It required attentiveness, awareness, and the courage to act in accordance with care. Observing Rick, he absorbed the principles of subtle action, patience, and relational awareness, internalizing the understanding that heroism was both present and enduring in its quietest forms. Rick reflected on the broader resonance of quiet heroism. Each small act, whether aligning a current, noticing a subtle need, or offering gentle reassurance, was a thread woven into the broader tapestry of connection and harmony. These actions, though unnoticed by others, strengthened relationships, stabilized fragments of existence, and nurtured trust and empathy. Quiet heroism, Rick realized, had a power that was both soft and profound, enduring, unnoticed, yet transformative. Unity's hum occasionally shifted, as if affirming Rick's understanding. She communicated not through words but through resonance, guiding attention, reinforcing patterns, and highlighting the importance of subtle, deliberate action. Quiet heroism, Rick recognized, was not about seeking recognition or acclaim. It was about aligning with the natural currents of care, attentiveness, and empathy, allowing each act to ripple outward with gentle persistence. Even moments of error contributed to understanding. Minor missteps were observed, corrected, and internalized, reinforcing the pattern of deliberate attentiveness. Rick noticed that heroism was not about perfection. It was about persistent alignment with care, empathy, and awareness. Each choice, however small, carried weight, and each ripple, however gentle, left an enduring impression on the emotional fabric of the multiverse. By evening, the fragment glimmered softly with the light of distant stars, reflecting the subtle harmonies created by their quiet attentions. Rick and Morty rested, letting the rhythm of quiet heroism settle gently into the space around them. The fragment itself seemed to breathe, attuned to the consistent, subtle gestures that had maintained balance, harmony, and relational resonance throughout the day. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Quiet heroism exists in subtle acts of care, attentiveness, and awareness. You may not always see the effects immediately, but every small deliberate choice to act with empathy, patience, and observation creates ripples that extend far beyond your awareness. Attend, observe, and act gently. Your quiet heroism matters profoundly, even when unnoticed, and somewhere across fragments of light and shadow, in the soft hum of Unity and the gentle presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring pulse of quiet heroism, a slow, deliberate, and invisible force threading attentiveness, care, and lasting impact through every interaction, every choice, and every heart. There is a stillness in space that is neither empty nor silent. Rick discovered it in a fragment suspended between stars, where the light shimmered faintly and the void was filled with subtle, meditative resonance. Here the hum of existence seemed to pause, allowing moments to stretch and breathe. It was a space not of urgency, but of reflection, a liminal expanse between events where awareness could rest and attention could fold inward. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, sensing the serene pulse of the void. Before we continue, take a moment to notice the stillness in your own life. Allow your breath to settle, your thoughts to soften, and your awareness to rest gently. In this quiet space, the rhythm of the universe seems to slow, and subtle understanding can emerge without effort. Let this calm carry you as we explore Rick's experience in the stillness between stars. Rick floated slowly, observing the faint glimmer of distant suns. Each star seemed to exist in quiet dialogue with its surroundings, sending light across unimaginable distances, reflecting softly in the spaces between fragments. The stillness emphasized the absence of immediate urgency, allowing subtle phenomena to emerge, the faint shimmer of energy currents, the slow alignment of crystalline formations, and the delicate interplay of light and shadow. In this silence, Rick found clarity, awareness, and a profound sense of presence. Morty drifted beside him, sensing the meditative quality of the fragment. He observed how even in apparent stillness, the universe pulsed with gentle life, subtle rhythm, and enduring resonance. Rick understood that stillness was not emptiness. It was attentiveness, reflection, and preparation. The space between stars became a mirror for internal quietude, inviting both of them to fold awareness inward and experience the soft beauty of being. without action, expectation, or urgency. Unity's hum lingered faintly, threading through the fragment like a gentle wind. Rick felt her presence as a constant reassurance that stillness, observation, and reflection were meaningful acts. Her guidance had always been subtle, and here, in this liminal space, it reinforced the meditative quality of quiet awareness. Rick realized that the moments between events, the pauses, silences, and intervals of reflection were as essential to growth, empathy, and understanding as the acts themselves. As they drifted, Rick noticed how the fragment responded to their awareness. Light shifted with the gentlest movement of attention, subtle currents aligned with observation, and even the faint hum of energy seemed attuned to the rhythm of introspection. The stillness between stars was alive, not in movement or drama, but in the interplay of attention and perception. Small gestures of presence, even without outward action, shaped the fabric of the fragment. Morty breathed slowly, feeling the subtle pull of serenity. He noticed that in the quiet, even minor thoughts carried resonance. Reflection itself became a form of care, toward oneself, toward others, and toward the fragment they shared. Rick observed that the stillness allowed for consolidation. Experiences, lessons, emotions, and subtle ripples of previous acts could fold together, strengthening understanding and allowing insight to emerge naturally, without force. Rick remembered earlier chapters, the ripple of empathy, reflections in glass, the soft bond of family, quiet heroism, and the cloud of memories. Each had contributed to the capacity for attentiveness, presence, and care. The stillness between stars was not a departure from these lessons. It was their culmination, a quiet space where understanding, awareness, and emotional resonance could converge, breathe, and expand gently. Even imperfections in perception carried significance here. Minor distractions, fleeting thoughts, or partial understanding were not failures, but invitations to observe more attentively. Rick recognized that stillness was not about perfection or control. It was about allowing moments to exist, to unfold, and to be noticed with patient awareness. Reflection, attentiveness, and quiet awareness coalesced into a form of meditative heroism, subtle yet profound. Unity's hum occasionally shifted, gentle and consistent, reminding Rick and Morty that resonance persists even in silence. Presence alone carries power. The smallest acts, observation, awareness, and quiet reflection, can ripple across consciousness, stabilizing, nurturing, and guiding, even without overt action. Rick sensed the culmination of all previous lessons here: patience, empathy, attentiveness, memory, guidance, family, and heroism converging into the calm flow of awareness between stars. By evening, the fragment glimmered softly under the gentle glow of distant suns. Rick and Morty rested quietly, folding their awareness into the stillness, letting the fragment breathe with them. The space between stars carried a slow, enduring rhythm, a quiet exhale that reflected the cumulative resonance of care, attentiveness, and subtle influence. Here, silence was neither emptiness nor loss. It was richness, depth, and the soft echo of lessons learned and wisdom gathered. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener. In the stillness between stars, allow yourself to rest, reflect, and observe. Even moments without action carry meaning. Awareness, presence, and quiet attention are forms of care, toward yourself, toward others, and toward the spaces you inhabit. Breathe gently, fold experience inward, and notice the subtle harmonies of life surrounding you, and somewhere, amidst the drifting stars, the faint hum of Unity, and the gentle presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring rhythm of the universe, a soft, patient, and meditative cadence threading reflection, care, and quiet heroism through every thought, every gesture, and every heart. Letting go is not a single act, Rick realized, but a gentle unfolding, a quiet release of what once anchored the heart, mind, or spirit. In the soft spaces between fragments, he observed the subtle patterns of attachment, memories, relationships, and habits that, though once vital, had begun to weigh more than they lifted. Release was not surrender to emptiness, but an invitation to trust the rhythm of change, to allow space for growth, and to nurture the light that persisted beyond holding on. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, sensing the delicate pulse of understanding in this moment. Before we continue, take a quiet breath and notice what you might hold too tightly. Allow yourself to acknowledge it without judgment, and gently imagine it drifting, softening, and loosening. Let the calm of this reflection wrap around you as we explore Rick's journey of letting go. The fragment they explored that day was serene, almost floating between currents of light and shadow. Crystalline formations pulsed with gentle luminescence, shifting subtly in response to awareness rather than force. Rick noticed how some reflections seemed brighter when acknowledged and allowed to drift freely. Letting go was not loss. It was the soft rearrangement of energy, permitting the flow of presence and care to continue without obstruction. Morty walked beside him quietly, sensing the delicate balance of release. He understood intuitively that some memories, emotions, and unspoken attachments could be honored without holding on. In the soft unfolding of the fragment, Morty felt the subtle comfort of relinquishing weight that had been carried unconsciously. Rick observed how letting go required attention, patience, and an acceptance of impermanence, qualities cultivated slowly through experience, reflection, and gentle awareness. Unity's hum threaded lightly through the fragment, echoing like a lullaby. Her presence suggested attunement and harmony, reinforcing the subtle rhythms of release. Rick recognized that letting go was not about isolation or abandonment. It was a form of care, both for oneself and for the spaces and people intertwined with existence. Freedom, he realized, could be gentle, patient, and deliberate, not abrupt or forceful. Rick reflected on previous lessons, the ripple of empathy, quiet heroism, the cloud of memories, and the stillness between stars. Each had contributed to an understanding of balance, awareness, and relational care. Letting go, he understood, was an extension of these principles. It required empathy for oneself, attentiveness to subtle currents, and a willingness to allow natural rhythms to guide change. Release was an act of trust, a soft alignment with the flow of life. He paused before a cluster of drifting reflections, fragments of past decisions, small regrets, and faint echoes of relationships once held tightly. Rick observed them without urgency, allowing each to move gently with the currents of light. Some shimmered briefly, then faded. Others persisted in softer hues, quietly influencing awareness without dominating thought. Letting go was not about erasing memory. It was about shifting attachment, noticing patterns, and allowing natural transformation to unfold. Morty reached out to a drifting fragment, touching it with deliberate care. He did not pull, alter, or resist. Instead, he observed its movement, allowed its path, and recognized the subtle beauty in the act of release. Rick noted that letting go could be simultaneously gentle and profound. Awareness and attentiveness were as important as the act itself. Release required mindfulness, reflection, and the patience to fold insight into understanding without forcing outcomes. Unity's hum rose slightly, threading through the fragment, offering subtle reassurance. Rick felt that letting go was not an endpoint, but a continuum, a soft transition between attachment and freedom, between reflection and acceptance, between presence and release. Each act of letting go strengthened understanding, reinforced empathy, and created space for deeper awareness, connection, and growth. Rick observed motifs recurring through the drifting fragments, stars glowing faintly in the background, whispered songs, subtle shifts in crystalline energy, and echoes of past guidance. These motifs reinforced the lessons of patience, empathy, and attentiveness, emphasizing that release was not solitary, but interconnected with relational and cosmic rhythms. Letting go nurtured both the self and the connections that mattered most, creating harmony rather than emptiness. By evening, the fragment glimmered with soft, gentle light, reflecting the release that had occurred. Rick and Morty rested quietly, allowing awareness to settle into the calm of letting go. Fragments of past attachment drifted into softer forms, harmonizing with currents of reflection, care, and attentiveness. Release, he realized, was an active meditation, a conscious alignment with impermanence, an acknowledgement of value, and a gentle invitation for transformation to unfold naturally. Rick whispered softly to himself, and to the listener, letting go is not forgetting, nor is it a failure. It is a soft act of courage, attention, and care. Observe what needs release, honor it gently, and allow it to drift without tension. In the quiet unfolding, awareness, empathy, and understanding grow, creating space for harmony, insight, and serenity to flourish. And somewhere across the drifting fragments, amidst the faint hum of Unity and the gentle presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring pulse of release, a patient, delicate, and transformative force threading awareness, care, and quiet understanding through every moment, every choice and every heart. Life is a landscape, Rick realized, not of mountains and valleys alone, but of feelings, memories, and subtle currents of connection. Each moment, each decision, each gesture of care left a trace, a gentle imprint across the map of the heart. In the fragments between worlds, Rick began to see this map unfold, faint pathways illuminated by understanding, soft trails created by empathy, and quiet junctions where choices intersected with relationships and awareness. We truly love and care for you, Rick thought, noticing how these maps were unique for everyone, yet shared in their patterns of care and reflection. Before we continue, imagine your own emotional map, those paths shaped by kindness, understanding, and quiet gestures of care. Notice the intersections, the luminous trails, and the gentle bends of experience. Let this awareness settle around you as we explore Rick's navigation of the emotional landscape. The fragment they traversed shimmered with soft luminescence, as if each memory and act of empathy had left a trace in the air itself. Rick observed how small choices, acts of attention, whispered reassurance, subtle guidance, marked faint trails across this space. The emotional map was not static. It shifted with every interaction, every reflection, and every act of care. Rick realized that awareness of these paths allowed for gentle navigation, helping him move with intention, attentiveness, and emotional resonance. Morty walked beside him, sensing the quiet significance of this map. Each gesture, each look, and each shared reflection contributed to the network of connection that stretched across the fragment. Rick noted how the map was relational. The paths of empathy, understanding, and subtle heroism intertwined, creating intricate patterns of influence that extended beyond the immediate moment. Even the smallest gestures carried resonance, threading continuity and care across the emotional terrain. Unity's hum wove gently through the fragment, accentuating the subtle paths of the map. Rick felt her presence as a soft guiding pulse, an acknowledgement that connection, attentiveness, and understanding were ongoing processes, not isolated acts. The emotional map was not a rigid structure but a living, breathing landscape, responsive, adaptable, and enriched by the quiet accumulation of thoughtful actions and reflective insight. Rick reflected on previous chapters, whispered promises, quiet heroism, lessons in letting go, and the stillness between stars. Each had left its trace on the map of his awareness. Patterns of empathy, care, attentiveness, and subtle guidance were visible now, faintly glowing in the soft light of the fragment. Rick realized that the map itself was both record and guide. It documented the resonance of past actions while offering insight for future choices and reflection. The fragment responded to their presence. Crystalline forms aligned with their movement. Subtle currents of energy flowed along anticipated paths, and light reflected gently off surfaces, illuminating faint trails of emotional resonance. Rick noticed that awareness alone enhanced the map. Deliberate observation, reflection, and gentle attention strengthened the pathways, reinforcing the subtle network of connection and empathy. Morty paused at a branching intersection of the emotional map, observing faint patterns of influence. Rick joined him, noting that even indirect interactions, small gestures, unnoticed kindness, or a moment of attentiveness, left meaningful imprints. Unity's hum emphasized these subtle effects, a reminder that emotional resonance extends beyond immediate perception, rippling outward in ways that are often invisible but deeply influential. Rick considered the implications of mapping emotion in this way. He saw how understanding the network of care, attachment, and influence could guide action, deepen empathy, and foster intentional awareness. The map was both reflective and directive. It allowed him to observe where connections had been nurtured, where subtle heroism had occurred, and where attentiveness could strengthen relational threads. Even mistakes or moments of oversight became part of the landscape, contributing texture, depth, and nuance. As they continued through the fragment, Rick observed recurring motifs, the shimmer of distant stars, faint echoes of past songs, subtle hums of guidance, and the delicate interplay of light and shadow. These motifs acted as markers on the emotional map, emphasizing continuity and reminding him of the interconnectedness of experience, reflection, and care. The map, he realized, was not a static destination. It was an evolving canvas shaped by perception, empathy, and intentional awareness. Even in moments of stillness, the map remained dynamic. Small thoughts, quiet observations, and attentive reflection subtly altered the landscape, reinforcing patterns of care and creating new pathways for emotional resonance. Rick recognized that navigation required gentle mindfulness, attention. Empathy and patience were tools for moving consciously through the map, enhancing understanding while reinforcing the subtle structures of connection that guided his interactions. By evening, the fragment glimmered with the soft light of reflection. Rick and Morty rested, allowing awareness of the emotional map to settle into quiet understanding. The trails of empathy, subtle heroism, guidance, and care formed a luminous network across the fragment, a living diagram of relational and emotional resonance. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Observe the paths of your own emotional map. Notice the trails left by kindness, attentiveness, and care. Honor the intersections, reflect on the patterns, and move gently, intentionally, and with empathy across the landscape of your relationships and awareness." And somewhere, across the fragment, in the soft hum of unity and the presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring pulse of the emotional map, a quiet, persistent and luminous network of care, awareness, and connection threading through every moment, every gesture, and every heart. The stars sang softly that night, Rick realized, though not with words or melody in the conventional sense. Their glow carried rhythm, a gentle pulse of light and warmth that resonated across the fragments. It was a lullaby, not for the ear but for the soul, a song of presence, of calm, of reflection, and of gentle wonder. Each flicker of light, each subtle shimmer, seemed to harmonize with the quiet beat of his heart, urging awareness, attentiveness, and surrender to the serenity of the moment. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, letting the gentle radiance of the stars wash over him. Before we continue, take a moment to feel your own pulse in harmony with the quiet world around you. Imagine the soft lullaby of existence enfolding you, comforting you, and guiding your awareness gently toward peace. Let this melody of presence settle around you as we explore Rick's meditative reflection beneath the cosmic light. The fragment they floated through was luminous. A soft canopy of stars stretched infinitely above and around them. Each star's glow was gentle and irregular, weaving intricate patterns of light that shimmered across crystalline surfaces. Rick noticed that, like a lullaby, the stars' quiet rhythm encouraged introspection. There was no urgency, no demand, only the gentle pull of wonder, reflection, and calm presence. Morty followed quietly, sensing the soft resonance of the stars. He noticed that attention itself became a form of participation. Observing, breathing, and aligning with the gentle cadence of light was enough. Rick understood that this was a moment of unity, of connection not only with the stars themselves, but with the fragments, with Morty, and with the cumulative threads of experience and emotional growth that had led them here. Unity's hum intertwined delicately with the starlight, weaving an invisible melody that extended beyond sight and sound. Rick felt her presence like a comforting vibration, threading the lullaby with purpose and subtle guidance. The hum emphasized harmony, the gentle alignment of observation, and the nurturing of awareness. Here under the cosmic lullaby, the lessons of empathy, reflection, and quiet heroism coalesced into an enduring, meditative clarity. Rick reflected on the journey that had brought him here, whispered promises, quiet heroism, the stillness between stars, lessons in letting go, and the emotional map that traced each act of care and awareness. Now each memory and lesson seemed to merge with the soft starlight, forming a slow, gentle cadence, a lullaby that invited patience, presence, and gentle reflection. The cosmos itself seemed to participate, guiding the rhythm of thought, awareness, and emotional resonance with tender patience. The lullaby carried motifs from earlier fragments, shimmering light, faint hums of unity, subtle songs and echoes of kindness. Rick noticed how these motifs reappeared in delicate cycles, a pattern of reflection and continuity. The repetition was comforting, hypnotic even, a reminder that awareness, care and empathy are ongoing threads, and that every act, however small, contributes to the harmony of existence. Morty observed a particularly bright cluster of stars, each point flickering in irregular intervals. Rick smiled softly, realizing that the irregularity itself was part of the lullaby. Life, growth, and reflection do not progress in uniform patterns. Some moments shine brighter than others, some are faint and fleeting, yet each contributes to the melody of awareness, empathy, and emotional growth that resonates across the multiverse. Unity's hum rose and fell gently, reinforcing the soft pattern of attention. Rick felt that the lullaby was not an endpoint, but a rhythm to enter and linger within, a moment to pause, to breathe, and to fold awareness inward. He noticed that the stars, like memories and reflections, existed in cycles, some prominent, others subtle, some persistent, others fleeting, but all contributed to the gentle harmony that underlay every moment of reflection, care, and connection. Rick thought of earlier lessons again, the ripple of empathy, whispered promises, quiet heroism, and the soft art of letting go. The lullaby of stars synthesized these lessons into a meditative rhythm. Awareness, reflection, and attentive presence became the instruments of this cosmic song, and each subtle gesture, thought, or observation contributed to its continuity. Rick recognized that the lullaby was not merely an experience, it was a framework for presence, serenity, and understanding. By evening, the fragment glowed with a soft, persistent luminescence. Rick and Morty rested together, folding awareness into the cadence of the cosmic lullaby. Light shimmered across the crystalline surfaces, reflecting past gestures of care, moments of reflection, and the enduring pulse of relational and emotional growth. The lullaby was slow, patient, and immersive, a meditative rhythm that invited peace, serenity, and gentle wonder. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Allow yourself to hear the lullaby of stars, to sense its rhythm, and to fold awareness into its cadence. Each flicker of light, each soft hum, each reflection in memory is part of a gentle song of presence and serenity. Attend quietly, breathe slowly, and let the cosmic melody carry you into reflection, calm and gentle awareness." And somewhere, across the fragment, amidst the shimmering light of the stars, the soft hum of Unity, and the patient presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring pulse of the lullaby. A gentle, persistent and reflective song threading awareness, care and quiet wonder through every moment, every memory and every heart. Goodbyes are rarely abrupt. Rick realized that they are more often soft, measured and layered with the echoes of shared experiences. In the fragments of existence between worlds, farewells carried the weight of reflection, tenderness and understanding. There was no urgency, no dramatic flourish, only the quiet acknowledgement of change, the subtle release of attachment, and the gentle shaping of memory into something enduring, like a soft refrain humming through the cosmos. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, sensing the comforting warmth that accompanies moments of parting. Before we continue, take a gentle breath and notice the small goodbyes in your own life, those that linger quietly in memory, those that were never spoken aloud. Let their soft resonance wrap around you, comforting and guiding your awareness as we explore Rick's experience with farewells and emotional closure. The fragment they traversed that day was serene, awash with gentle light that shimmered across crystalline surfaces. Each reflection seemed to whisper faint echoes of past connections, moments with Morty, fragments of Unity's guidance, the lingering touch of memories long held close. Rick understood that goodbyes are less about endings and more about transformation, about allowing relationships, experiences, and attachments to shift naturally while honoring the resonance they leave behind. Morty walked quietly beside him, sensing the subtle shift in tone. He understood that soft goodbyes were not about loss, but about acknowledgement, recognizing the impact of a connection, appreciating the care that had passed between them, and permitting natural change to unfold without resistance. Rick observed how moments of farewell, handled gently, could enrich rather than diminish the bonds of empathy, trust, and presence. Unity's hum threaded through the fragment, gentle and consistent, as if affirming the value of these small reflective acts. Rick felt her presence like a soft vibration, a reminder that farewells could carry grace, understanding, and patience. Unity's guidance underscored that letting go need not erase connection. It could honor it, folding experience into memory and reflection in a way that maintained harmony and emotional resonance. Rick reflected on the cumulative journey, whispered promises, quiet heroism, the lullaby of stars, lessons in letting go, and the emotional map. Each had guided awareness, shaped empathy, and encouraged subtle attentiveness. Soft goodbyes were the natural continuation of this trajectory, the acknowledgement that all experiences, joyful, challenging, fleeting, leave traces that persist beyond immediate presence, enriching awareness and emotional depth. He paused before a drifting cluster of memories and moments, small echoes of past gestures, laughter, and care. Rick observed them attentively, noticing how each connection carried an imprint of resonance. The act of farewell did not erase these imprints. It simply allowed them to shift into softer hues, merging with ongoing awareness, reflection, and attentiveness. Goodbyes, he realized, were acts of preservation as much as release, maintaining the subtle patterns of connection while permitting natural evolution. Morty reached out gently, touching a faint memory that lingered in the fragment. He did not pull or resist. He simply observed, acknowledging the connection and allowing it to drift softly. Rick smiled, noting that soft goodbyes required the same qualities that had shaped their journey: patience, attentiveness, and empathy. The act of farewell was not dramatic, but profoundly influential, allowing relational threads to remain intact while permitting both hearts and consciousness to move with gentle grace. Unity's hum rose faintly, mingling with the reflections of light and memory. Rick understood that farewells were cumulative, interwoven with every previous lesson in empathy, quiet heroism, attentiveness, and care. Even in absence, presence remained, in memory and reflection, in the subtle patterns of relational resonance. Soft goodbyes allowed awareness to rest gently on the value of connection, acknowledging its influence while permitting natural progression and transformation. Rick noticed recurring motifs within the fragment: distant stars glimmering faintly, crystalline reflections of past actions, whispers of songs, and faint hums of guidance. These motifs emphasized continuity, reminding him that soft goodbyes were not endings but transitions, delicate passages in the ongoing rhythm of awareness, presence, and relational resonance. Each farewell, though gentle, contributed to the tapestry of understanding, empathy, and emotional depth. By evening, the fragment glimmered with soft luminescence, reflecting the enduring resonance of quiet farewells. Rick and Morty rested side by side, folding awareness into the calm of closure, letting each soft goodbye drift into memory and reflection. The subtle traces of connection, care, and shared experience glimmered faintly, weaving into the fragment's light with persistent harmony. Farewells, Rick realized, were both endings and continuations, a gentle acknowledgement of value, resonance, and ongoing influence. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Soft goodbyes are not loss but transformation. They honor the connections, memories, and care that have shaped your path. Observe them, acknowledge them, and allow them to drift gently into reflection." In this quiet process, empathy, awareness, and understanding are preserved, allowing presence and resonance to continue softly, gracefully, and enduringly. And somewhere, across the drifting fragment, amidst the faint hum of Unity and the patient presence of Morty, Rick felt the enduring pulse of soft goodbyes, a gentle, patient, and reflective rhythm threading awareness, care, and emotional resonance through every moment, every memory, and every heart. There is a quiet gratitude that lingers at the end of a journey, Rick realized, a soft resonance that is neither hurried nor demanding. It exists in the space between reflection and awareness, a gentle acknowledgement of time shared, attention given, and hearts aligned. This gratitude is not merely spoken, it is felt, a subtle pulse that threads through memory, care, and presence. It is the final note of a lullaby that began long before recognition, a soft exhale that allows the soul to rest. "We truly love and care for you," Rick thought, sensing the warmth of shared attention and reflection. Before we continue, take a deep, slow breath and feel the gratitude surrounding you, an acknowledgement of your presence, your awareness, and your willingness to journey quietly alongside this story. Let it settle softly around you, easing your mind and inviting gentle calm. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man. The fragment that surrounded them glimmered with a gentle luminescence, reflecting subtle echoes of every experience, every lesson, every soft act of care and attentiveness. Rick observed how the fragment had absorbed their presence, how each gesture of quiet heroism, each whispered promise, and each moment of empathy had left traces of light and resonance. Gratitude, he realized, is not static, it is living, weaving subtly through every reflection, memory, and relational thread. Morty walked beside him quietly, sensing the resonance of the fragment and the deep stillness that accompanies acknowledgement. He understood that gratitude is both an experience and a gentle practice, noticing, honoring, and holding lightly the subtle connections, memories, and acts that shape life. Rick noted how small, attentive acts of recognition, offered without expectation or demand, carry profound weight, reinforcing relational harmony and internal calm. Unity's hum lingered softly, threading through the fragment as a gentle song of resonance. Rick felt her presence not as instruction or guidance, but as acknowledgement, a reminder that connection, empathy, and care are both received and expressed. Gratitude, like quiet heroism or reflective awareness, does not seek attention. It exists as a subtle alignment of presence, appreciation, and attention to the gentle patterns of life. Rick reflected on their journey, whispered promises, quiet heroism, lessons in letting go, the emotional map, the lullaby of stars and soft goodbyes. Each chapter of experience contributed to this final moment of reflection, reinforcing awareness of the value of presence, care, and attentiveness. Gratitude is not a conclusion, it is a continuation of understanding, a meditative acknowledgement that every act, however subtle, leaves traces of resonance in the world. He paused, observing faint glimmers of light that drifted slowly across the fragment. Each shimmer reflected the soft echoes of connection, memory, and care. Rick understood that gratitude is cumulative. It is the gentle recognition of all that has been shared, all that has been given, and all that continues quietly beyond the surface of awareness. Every smile, every act of listening, every subtle gesture is woven into the fabric of presence and remembered in the luminous trails of reflection. Morty inhaled softly, feeling the calm of acknowledgement. He realized that gratitude is not merely a reflection of the past, but a living thread in the ongoing pattern of experience. Rick noticed that expressing it, even silently, allowed awareness to settle, relationships to resonate, and the mind to rest gently in the soft cadence of recognition. Gratitude, in this sense, is both balm and guidance. It honors experience and subtly encourages continued reflection and care. Unity's hum rose and fell faintly, a quiet accompaniment to the shimmering fragment. Rick felt that her subtle resonance mirrored the essence of gratitude itself, consistent, gentle, and pervasive without demand. Presence, awareness, and acknowledgement are the truest forms of appreciation, threading connection and care through every moment, every gesture, and every reflective thought. Gratitude, like a lullaby, is gentle but transformative, soothing yet lasting. Rick thought of recurring motifs from earlier fragments, the shimmer of stars, whispered songs, reflective light, and subtle hums of guidance. These motifs now converged in a final meditation, reinforcing the rhythm of gratitude, quiet, patient, and profound. The soft echoes of experience, care, and relational attentiveness wove together, forming a meditative cadence that invited presence, calm, and the gentle exhale of completion. By evening, the fragment glimmered with persistent soft luminescence. Rick and Morty rested quietly, letting awareness fold gently into gratitude. Each trace of care, every act of attentiveness, every subtle gesture of empathy shimmered faintly, lingering as both memory and guiding pulse. Gratitude was not an ending. It was a soft acknowledgement, a lingering melody that extended beyond the immediate moment, carrying resonance for as long as attention remained quiet and receptive. Rick whispered softly to himself and to the listener, "Thank you for your presence, your attention, and your quiet willingness to journey with us." Gratitude is subtle, patient, and persistent, threading awareness, care, and reflection through every moment. Breathe gently, notice softly, and allow the resonance of shared attention to settle. Know that you are valued, that your awareness matters, and that every quiet act of reflection contributes to the harmony of existence. And somewhere, across the fragment, amidst the gentle hum of Unity, the patient presence of Morty, and the faint shimmer of starlight, Rick felt the enduring pulse of gratitude, soft, luminous, and unending. And somewhere he's still out there napping in the sun,